The voices of the hitman, Bret Hart, and the one and only Slick Ric Flair. It is Saturday, November 23rd, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles. Good morning to everybody. 710 KNUS Weather Center. Weather 63 today. On Sunday, tomorrow, it's going to be 53 in the city. Looking at Thanksgiving Day, 38. It's going to be a cold day. I get to work next Wednesday, or this coming Wednesday, with the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. Without further ado, I am such a fan. And when I started thinking about this idea of comparing the First World War to the frightening parts of the world we're watching today, I thought the one and only, and he is the one and only, he could be a talk show host. He's one of those few people who could come across from Baylor University, Dr. David Smith. Dr. Smith, thank you so much. Happy Saturday and good morning.
It's been so long since we've talked.
Indeed. Do we have a little bit of garble in that line? Do you think I'm talking to Adam? Adam, do you hear anything garbly? Not sure yet. Okay. I first met Dr. Smith. I was thinking about this driving in. Your Audie Murphy book, and then I read your George Dewey book. What I did not know is that you had written a Patton book.
Yeah, I wrote a Patton book quite a long time ago. It was just a little book for a press that marketed to libraries mostly, but I had a lot of fun with it.
I have a lead question. What was the cause? It's one of the mysteries of history. What caused the First World War? What's your opinion? Before we do the other stuff, what's your opinion of George Patton?
George Patton was what I would call an operational genius. He was very, very good at taking an army that was in the field and doing what was on his target list with it. And he saw things, he saw openings, he saw operational chances and opportunities, and he knew that those things were fleeting, and he knew when to take them.
Could he exist in the United States military today?
I think he could. I think most people might think, oh, no, he's such a renegade. No, I think he could. I think he would be a creative operational commander. I don't think he would be a very good strategic level, or certainly not a very good staff officer. But for an army in the field, the problem is we don't really have these big field armies like we did back then, and that was what he excelled at.
He had I've read books about him. He had an upper-class childhood. He had a great relationship with his family. He was wealthy. He was an Olympiad, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. He was, his sister was the lover of Jack Pershing. It was like, he went
on and off again.
On and off again. They went to France together. And I read a piece that said, had George Patton's let me back it out. Had Black Jack Pershing not broken off his relationship with Patton's sister, Patton would have never ended up in the armor units.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, Black Jack Pershing's story is so sad. He lost his whole family in a fire, and he sort of, I don't want to say rebounded, but he sort of hit Nina Patton on the rebound, and he realized that she was in love with him, and he really wasn't in love with her. And he ultimately, like you said, broke it off. But it's interesting to think of what would have been the case had they become a married couple, a power couple.
But if I remember correctly, Patton was on Black Jack's staff.
Yeah, in Mexico, right?
Yeah,
during the punitive expedition.
Yes, and he brought the two bodies on the fenders like they were deer. Is that a true story?
Yeah, that's a true story. That he had gone after Pancho Villa's lieutenant, and he caught him in a raid and brought him back to Pershing strapped to the hood of his car.
Well, these guys, and you write about these kinds of people, we're going to talk about them in many ways this morning. I hope you have a long, long time. This is one of my favorite people, Dr. David Smith from Baylor University. I met him with the book that he had done on Audie Murphy. And you really, I'm bouncing back and forth, but you really showed an Audie Murphy that I had never read about before. I just asked you to do an overview of George Patton, which was too quick, but an overview of Audie Murphy.
Right. I appreciate what you say about the book because I really wanted that book to unlock him in a way that wasn't just hero worship. He was a child of the Depression.
Well,
He grew up in rural Texas in cotton country, northeast of Dallas, and he was extremely poor. His father ran off, and his mother died when he was a teenager. And he joined the army after the attack on Pearl Harbor. He joined in the summer of '42, and he became a tremendous soldier, just an absolute dynamo. But he had such, oh gosh, what would you say? Such a troubled youth,
oh,
and such resentment and such deprivation. The army gave him a structure that he had never had. His family, his siblings, taking care of his siblings gave him a sense of duty that fit in very well with the army, and providing for his family, going hunting in East Texas provided him with a crack shot eye. He could hit something that people couldn't even see. He had all the ingredients of a great soldier. And then World War II just broke him. What he experienced, he had PTSD, what we call PTSD now. And it was just, it's a tragedy. And then he became a movie star.
yes.
Then he became the biggest star for Universal International in the 50s. Wow.
I don't know if 'cause after reading you, and then Some Like It Hot comes to Denver, and Tony Curtis is playing the role that Joey, I think it was Joey Brown, played in the original one with Marilyn Monroe, and but he played the rich old man role.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got an interview with him, and I asked him about hiding from Audie Murphy.
Yeah, I remember you and I talking about this a long time ago, the fact that Tony Curtis and Audie had this connection. It's fascinating.
And he hid in a dumpster. He told me the story. He said they were on the lot, and Tony was, what do we say today, a ladies' man. And so was Audie, though, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And
right.
So Tony Curtis was with a woman, and apparently what he was saying, once a woman was with Audie, she was going to stay. She was Audie's girl.
Yeah.
And so he said he saw Audie Murphy coming, and he hid in a dumpster. He said Audie didn't see him, but he saw Audie, and he went and hid in a dumpster from Audie Murphy.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. The people who got to see Audie's bad side were afraid of him.
Oh, whose house did he go to? Was it Bing Crosby? He went to Bing's house.
Gosh, I don't know that story. What did he do at Bing Crosby's
when
house?
they recruited him to become an actor?
James Cagney.
Oh, was it Cagney? Okay.
Yeah.
Cagney
brought him to Hollywood.
Why did Cagney get rid of him?
Because he couldn't act.
Yeah.
Cagney said, wide open after a year of being with Audie and paying for acting lessons, I just don't think it's going to click with him. He can't act. He's a great, if troubled young man, but he can't act. And they parted ways very amicably. I mean, Audie always thought Cagney was great, and Cagney thought Audie was a good person. He just wasn't the person to rescue Cagney's production company.
Was he the one that Audie slept with guns and slept with, and someone started pointing that out, that he really was breaking down, or had broken down?
Right. Yeah. Audie slept with a gun under his pillow and all the time. And the people who would go on press junkets with him when his movies opened, they'd go on these nationwide press junkets. He always had, an assistant go with him, and his assistants saw firsthand that this guy was broken, and he had horrible dreams, and he would wake up in the middle of the night hallucinating, and he would have a gun under his pillow, and people were afraid to go on the road with him.
Our guest is the one and only Dr. David Smith from Baylor University. Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. It's going to be 63 for a high this morning. And doesn't his father show up in Chicago? I remembered that part of your book as well.
Yeah, it's in Dallas, actually.
Okay.
Audie's back in Dallas, pressing a movie. I can't remember which movie it is. and he's staying at the Adolphus Hotel downtown Dallas. And somebody comes up to him and says, "There's a guy in the lobby claiming to be your father." And Audie says, "I have no father."
Yeah.
And the guy gets sent away. But they do have a small reunion later when one of Audie's brothers dies.
Okay.
And his dad comes to the funeral, and one of Audie's brothers was a highway patrolman stationed north of Dallas around Plano. And they had a little bit of a reunion, an intimate talk at the funeral of one of Audie's brothers.
Did Audie go on raids with cops and do all kinds of?
Yeah, he did. That was one of the weirdest stories that I came across. He had this sense of right and wrong, and he had this sense. This goes back into his childhood. This goes into his days in the Army. He wanted to be involved with protecting the law, protecting the innocent, and prosecuting the guilty. And he went on raids with, I guess you'd call them drug squads, who would go into the inner cities. I mean, he knew people in the L.A. Sheriff's Department, and he knew people in the Houston Sheriff's Department. And he went on some raids with some people, and he really thought he was contributing to the betterment of society.
And he married. Didn't he have two boys, or didn't he have two sons?
He did. He had two sons from his second wife.
Okay.
His first wife was a movie star that he got infatuated with, and then that marriage crumbled within a year. And then he married a Braniff Airlines stewardess that he fell in love with on his trips back and forth between L.A. and Dallas. And they had two children. They had two boys.
And everybody kind of goes into. But I thought his widow did a lot of stuff for GIs.
Yeah, she was really, really good at getting involved with helping GIs, and she knew what he suffered from, and she wanted to help treat that.
In the film that I remember seeing him, I don't know how old I was, 12 maybe, Audie Murphy's To Hell and Back.
Yeah.
How real was that movie in terms of, because it was a 50s film? How real was it? It
was exaggerated,
yeah,
and there was a lot of extra stuff added. The romance that was added in, I believe, the Italian campaign, that never happened. And it cuts short. It stops short. Plus, a lot of the details were not accurate at all. Even the way they filmed his Medal of Honor winning episode was completely wrong. But I mean, they were shooting it to get it out, and they were shooting it not thinking. They didn't want a historian hanging around telling them what was wrong.
And that really
nobody does that.
No one wants that. Who am I reading now that says no? It's I'm there's a film out now about the murder of my colleague Alan Berg. And I've not seen the film, but I've talked to two people that have seen it, and it's not even remotely close. And they bought it. They bought a great book. Local. He's now a member of the Denver City Council. His name's Kevin Flynn, gifted writer. Ooh. And Kevin and his partner, who's now no longer with us, a guy named Gary Gerhardt, and they sold the book. But it's not accurate, and I don't know if that should bother anybody or not, but it's not accurate. And maybe like you're saying about Audie, that they couldn't do it straight.
Yeah, they had a tight filming schedule, and they filmed at a Army base up in Washington or Oregon, I think, and they had to film it in the summertime, and it was kind of hard to get snow and ice.
Yeah,
so they just they just rode around it.
And Dr. Smith, that movie made his beginning of his career. Did they see him as an actor then?
That wasn't his first movie. He had done several movies before then, and he had a pretty good reputation among some people as a gripping stage presence, shall we say, or a screen presence. But To Hell and Back, that was the one that really sort of vaulted him into another level of stardom.
Boy, he must have been one tough little fill in the blank.
Oh yeah, without question.
Yeah.
He was a tough. Everybody first of all was struck by how small he
He was a
was.
little guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and then everybody, once they got past that, they were struck by how tough and intense and, menacing he could be.
Oh, I mean, my only indirect contact is sitting in the studio with Tony Curtis. And
Yeah.
I mean, he told wonderful stories off air. You can't tell them on air, but he had some great Tony Curtis stories. And
Audie wanted Tony Curtis to play him in the movie.
Yep.
Audie didn't want to play himself.
And Elvis dyed his hair because of Tony Curtis.
Is that right?
Yep. Tony Curtis
I
told me
didn't
that.
know that.
No, he said Elvis had brown hair, but he wanted to be Tony Curtis, so he dyed his hair as that black blue color. And
Yeah.
but he told me that story. I said, because I had read your book, and I think you had alluded to it in the book about Tony Curtis and Audie Murphy. And he was in town. He's playing the old man in Some Like It Hot. He's sitting in the studio. I'm doing a morning show on KHOW. And I was like, he was very approachable. You could you could talk to him about anything, especially off air. And I asked him about Marilyn Monroe, and he said yes.
Yeah.
So see where that's headed. But I said I just read this book, and I told him about you and he said, and he went like he did that appalled thing, and then he said, I hid in the dumpster. Woo! And okay.
Wow. I wish I could have interviewed Tony Curtis for the book.
Well, I'll tell you what, I really, I felt, he was one of those guys that, he has a big name and you meet him and you love him even more instead of the other way that often happens that, I wish I'd have never met this guy, but he told stories about him. And your book is, your book, by the way, it's The Life of Audie Murphy. What's the main title, Professor?
The Price of Valor.
Okay. What's the patent book? What's it titled?
I think the patent book is just George S. Patton, a biography.
Okay, I have to find that. And then I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
No, it's an older book. It came out with Greenwood Press back a long time, back when you and I were younger.
I went to George Patton's grave.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and it's teary, it's emotional. He's the only. It's a bowl of crosses, stars of David, and then they're all facing this way. And George Patton's grave faces his men. His men all face George Patton. Yeah.
I'm not surprised at that. That's what he would have wanted.
Yeah.
He wanted to be buried with his men.
Oh yeah. I just finished another Ike book where when he was buried in a GI coffin from the Second World War.
I didn't know that, but that doesn't surprise me at all.
They put his dress uniform on, his 5-star.
Yeah.
And they put him in the kind of a coffin that a GI would have received in Second World War.
That's such a good story. It reminds me of Thomas Jefferson writing his grave marker, and he didn't include President of the United States on his grave marker. Thomas Jefferson did. And then Ike, this person who was one of the most famous people in the entire world and president for 8 years, he wanted to be buried in his army uniform.
There's I've been reading so much again, but there's a book entitled The 60s and about Nixon and Jack Kennedy. I just started Brands' new history text on American Firsters about the conflict between Bora, Lindbergh, and FDR, and they all come back again and again and again. And that's one of the reasons that I've asked you on the show. You're kind enough to come back with us. The study of history is a study of repetition in many ways, is it not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the study of things that happen similarly over and over and over again, and it's the study of the way people forget that things happen similarly.
And also, one more of Professor's books was the book about George Dewey and the American Navy, and Dewey, of course. I worked in a steel mill when I was a kid, and there was something called shutdown, where the mill would shut down for 2 weeks every summer. and we would have a good time at a place called Dewey Beach. And
in Delaware.
Until I read your book, I just thought it was Dewey Beach. They named that beach after George Dewey, right?
They did. Yeah, there were Dewey cities and towns and beaches and parks and schools all over the country.
But I spent 1 or 2 summers for 2 weeks or 5 days where it was in Dewey Beach, and I never knew it was named after.
That's great.
I'm serious. I said, wait a minute. Smith said, what? And I said, I'm still in contact with a couple of the guys. And I said, you know what? And of course it went over their heads. Really? Okay. But now let me do this. World War I and what we're watching now. And and why I cut a promo over this. Woodrow Wilson was in charge when the U.S. gets in, but Joe Biden is a short timer, and now these rockets are being launched, and Putin's giving people warnings, and it just. And I'm a Barbara Tuchman fan, and her idea of the tripwire of the guns of August, when she talks about this. Can we pick it up there and we come back on the other side?
Yeah.
I put the man on hold. This is really amazing. I am such a fan. He could come here. He could sit down and do the show. Dr. David Smith from Baylor University later in the morning, and talking about growing up. So this book is entitled Joe Louis and Billy Conn. And right before the Second World War, these two guys fought. And Billy was an Irish kid from Pittsburgh. And my dad said, and I guess every Irishman said, well, I knew Billy, but I knew one of his sons, Billy Jr., and the book is about boxing's unforgettable summer of 1941 when those two fought. And I'm going to ask this guy, he's a pretty good boxing historian, about what happened the other night with Tyson. And I think, pro wrestling, there are things called shoots and things called works. And a work is what they always do, and a shoot is when it turns real. And I think they worked that fight. All right. My friends at Water Pros, and this is a great idea with the holidays right here. Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. You can remove forever chemicals, microplastics, hard water. Water Pros Peter Boyles special. Now, it's got $3,195 as the price, but it is so worthwhile for your health. But even before that, to start this process, go to waterpros.net and sign up for your free in-home consultation. They'll do this. They did it for us, and they showed the results. They come to your home, they test your water, they answer all your questions and concerns about your water. These guys are wonderful. Water Pros, family-owned, veteran-owned business, dedicated to providing you with the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. So go to waterpros.net today and request your free water test, 303-862-5554. If nothing else, take the gift of a water test, 303-862-5554, 303-862-5554, and ask for the Peter Boyles special. Now, 710 KNUS, good morning, everybody. 63 the high, 53 tomorrow. This coming Wednesday, I will be working the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. Then Friday, I think we'll look at the JFK assassination. So it's a Saturday morning. Dr. Smith is with us. Stay here.
Premiumbeat.com. 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 Premiumbeat.com.
Morning, everybody. It is a Saturday morning, 710 KUNUS. I'm Peter Boyles, November 23rd, 2024. 63 warm and dry. It is 9:28. This is just a treat for me. Professor David Smith from Baylor University. We have never met. I feel like I know him so well. We've done bunches of radio shows together. He's a gifted historian. And he was the first guy I thought about watching now. And last night, I started reading more to get more prepped. And Putin now is issuing a warning to the United States. And the President, Vladimir Putin, lowers the threshold for nuclear strike in response to what we're watching happen. And I can't help but think of a World War I scenario. And one more question I have for you, because in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Russians never let the Cubans near the button. They feared them. They feared, particularly, they were afraid of Che Guevara. The Che Guevara would launch. They figured, and maybe not Raul, but perhaps Fidel or whomever. Do you think that the Biden administration and the DOD trust the Ukrainians with the button, or do you think we have operators there or American GIs are there on those missiles?
That's a very good question. I would imagine that I obviously don't know this, but I would imagine that there is some sort of eyes on the ground for the arms suppliers in Ukraine to make sure that targeting is not done in a way that is, to their eyes, dangerously escalatory.
I've read, I shouldn't say so many, but I've read a lot about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I'm one of these believers that everything runs through Cuba. And one of the things that we now know is the Russians would not allow the Cubans, the guards, the Soviet guards, pointed out, not in. And the guy they really feared was Guevara. And I'm thinking to myself, why would we collectively, taxpayers, pay for these missiles that are in Ukraine and not have, and this is against what we're being told by the administration, but do you really think they would hand these kinds of, they're ICBMs actually, and hand them over to the Ukrainians and say, go ahead, have a nice day?
I don't know. I think that the Ukrainians probably at least have been very wary of crossing the United States. And they probably understand that if they do something with the weapons that the United States disapproves of, that's going to make further weapons sales very, very difficult. So I think the Ukrainians know that the Ukrainians probably know they're on a short leash, or we would have seen stuff like this happen earlier.
The Russians, Putin, they've been warning the West for months that if this administration allowed the Ukraine to fire U.S., British, and French missiles into Russia, Moscow would consider those NATO members to be directly involved in the war in the Ukraine, which also then brings me back to First World War.
I'm not sure. I know that Putin very clearly doesn't want it to happen, and he's been expanding a great deal of energy to try to dissuade his opponents from doing it. But we'll see what happens next.
Do you see any Wilhelm II in Vladimir Putin?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wilhelm II in Putin. Wow. Maybe. Gosh, I would have to think about that a little bit. Do you?
Yeah, in a way, they're autocratic. The Kaiser, that's who it is. Kaiser Bill. They used to call him Kaiser Bill.
Yep.
Kaiser Wilhelm. That the Russians supported Serbia. Austria-Hungary waited to declare war until they got assurance from Kaiser Bill that Germany would support their cause.
Right.
The Austro-Hungarian leaders feared that a Russian intervention would involve Russia's ally, France, possibly Great Britain, and that's the setup, isn't it?
It's totally the setup. It's interesting that you bring this up because I was just doing the beginnings of World War I in my intro to military history class yesterday.
Wow.
And, Thanksgiving break's coming up. I'm under the gun trying to get more stuff in, worrying that I'm not going to get any place in the class to where I want to be. And I thought, okay, I've got to get into this World War I thing, and I've got to get through it and at least get halfway through the war. And we didn't even get to the Battle of the Marne.
Ooh.
It's such a complicated story. And it's a complicated story because it has all these intricacies, all these moving parts, all this diplomacy, and all these instances of one country trying to guess what the other country will do if this country does something that it wants to do against this other country.
Yeah.
It's such a tangled web, and I think it's illustrative to look at it today and look at Europe today and think, what are these complexities that could pull the continent into war?
I mean, I'm not in your league, but as an amateur history reader, the question of what caused World War I, it wasn't like World War II.
Right.
World War II is easily, I don't want to say easily, but is understandable, or the tyrants and everything that go with that. But this, what's the difference between Nicky Romanoff and Kaiser Bill? No.
Yeah, well, they're cousins.
They're all first cousins.
Yeah, the whole mess of them's related. They're trying to outguess and intimidate and send messages without being too overt, and they've got all these agreements that pull them against their own interests in the war. And you're right, somebody like Kaiser Bill and Nicholas II, right? All these autocrats, they feel like they can game this system perfectly. They feel like their power is enough to override natural impulses, and that's kind of worrisome.
And how quickly the Archduke gets murdered.
Uh-huh.
And I used to believe that was the cause of the First World War, and I'm not so sure I still believe that. These guys, and I read a book when I was an undergrad called the Nicky Willie Letters.
Right, that's a great collection of telegrams.
Yeah, and they're first cousins, and so is George. Right, George is their cousin too.
And they sent these telegrams back and forth with Wilhelm II begging his cousin, don't mobilize against Austria. Don't start mobilizing. Don't start mobilizing.
Yes.
And Nicholas II said, this doesn't involve you. This doesn't involve you at all. Why are you doing this? And we're just trying to protect our ally Serbia. And Wilhelm II knows why Russia can't start mobilizing, because that starts the clock for the Schlieffen Plan.
Yes.
And he can't say that, but it's so frustrating to watch them. And then Willie says, if you don't stop mobilizing, we're going to regard it as an act of war against us. And Nicholas II says, why? We're not going to attack you at all.
Yes.
And then the next thing you know, Western civilization hits the iceberg.
Do you? I mean, I'm a huge Barbara Tuchman fan, and she talked about all of this leading up to the Guns of August, which is one of my faves, and
It's such a good book.
yeah, and they kept escalating. And I look at Joe Biden, I look at all these, the French, and now the Poles this morning are talking about it, and Putin's talking about it. How do you think? How much conversation do you think is going on between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump?
Wow. I can't even imagine. I don't think I would be surprised either way. I don't think I would be surprised if they're not talking. Don't think I would be surprised if they're on the phone every day. I think I would be more surprised, honestly, if they weren't talking.
I would as well.
Yeah. And I think both of them think of themselves as masters of their situation.
Yes. Yes.
And whether they are or not is to be determined.
So then also it's the First World War is a destroyer of the Middle East. And now we have, do you think Netanyahu is talking to Donald Trump?
Wow. Yeah, you're asking me the hard questions today.
I don't have the answers.
I don't have the answer.
Huh?
Again,
Yeah.
I think I would be more surprised if they weren't than if they were.
But the Middle East plays out so well. The time of Lawrence and and Balfour and everything that's there. I mean, it's happening on dozens of levels, is it not?
Right. The difference with the Middle East now and then is now you have a whole patchwork of independent sovereign states in the Middle East. And back then you just had the Ottoman Empire that was crumbling, and you had power groups trying to assert their own way of steering their future, which is what Lawrence of Arabia is about.
That's exactly what it's about.
Yeah.
Do you think Lawrence knew they were lying, that they were lying to the Arabs?
I think by the end, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if he knew it at the beginning, but that last scene in the movie where he's driving away and the French are coming in. I think he knew before that his Arab allies were going to get double crossed.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I at one time thought not, and then read some other books, and somewhere along the line, he was more of an imperialist than he was pro-Arab.
Right, but he changed, right?
Yes, he did.
And the people who change their positions are interesting stories to watch what makes them change. Dewey fell in line with the McKinley administration basically because he was a good soldier and he followed the commander-in-chief, and the commander-in-chief says, we're going to annex the Philippines. Dewey says, fine by me, even though he had said before that the United States has no business annexing the Philippines. And I think Lawrence changed the same way, that Lawrence went from being sort of a less reflective, I don't want to say apparatchik, but part of the army, to someone who had his eyes opened by what he was seeing, and then realized that I'm not getting the full story from the command structure, and then suddenly these guys, my allies in the Arab world, are going to be betrayed and sold out.
Were they ever?
Yeah.
Did you? I'm sorry.
I think it's different today because now you have Saudi Arabia and Iran and Israel and Iraq and Kuwait and Yemen and all these independent states that have the ability to deal with each other as independent states and armed forces, and you really didn't have that back then.
But it didn't stop Bush and Cheney. And I mean, seriously, I mean, it didn't stop them.
Nothing did.
Nothing did. To throw the whole thing into the wastebasket again. Why does that happen? Why do you? Here's a legitimate question. Do you think George Bush ever cracked a book on the history of Afghanistan, or read anything about the Soviet experience in Afghanistan before he began what he began?
I sort of doubt it.
I do too.
But I think he assumed that the people giving him advice were giving him advice from a position of being very well informed. But, not a whole lot of people, You and I are in the minority of
Yeah.
people who understand what a hold history has on the present. And a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, and now here we are again, and this is
Yeah,
I got to take a pause. We'll come back. Here we are
sure.
again, sitting with militarism and alliances and nationalism and all the causes of World War One. I mean, I know it
Yeah.
sounds simplistic, but it's a framework, isn't it?
It's a recipe.
Yeah,
Exactly it.
yeah.
I mean, you've got these ingredients all put out on the table, and you think, these things can go together to make like a taco or whatever,
Yeah.
and all these things that you've got internationally can go together to make a cataclysmic war, and we need to
Well,
keep
no,
them apart. We don't want to
absolutely.
mix these things.
And the cheering from the sidelines that when the U.S. goes into Iraq, and the cheering from the sidelines I hear now on talk radio or from politicians about the Ukraine. And I mean, I'm close to my pause. Donald Trump sends COVID tests to Vladimir Putin. Everybody made fun of it. And I thought to myself, what a smart thing to have done. Whether you like Trump or dislike Trump or like Putin or dislike Putin, somebody was smart enough to send the COVID test. It was sense and sensibility. It made sense to do so.
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw something, when I read about that, I thought, wow, that was, I don't know what to call it, but I thought, wow,
Yeah.
that was a smart move.
You never know what kind of influence soft power like
Yes.
that will have.
Yeah. So let me set this up. First of all, one of the very, very best I've ever been around, Professor David Smith from Baylor, is with us. So it's the late 19th century. There's military competition, the rise of imperialism, European powers, the stronger military judged by. And was there a culture of paranoia that I've read about that was taking place as well? They were related but distrusted one another.
You mean among the royal family?
Yes.
Yes, they watched each other with a great deal of suspicion, and they did things that triggered suspicion in the others. Right? I mean, Wilhelm II
Yes.
building up his fleet to the point where it was going to challenge the British fleet
Yes.
for no reason was an absolute thing that damaged the relationship between Britain and Germany. Yeah, for sure. Stand
by, Professor, please. I want to put them up on hold. Thanks, Adam. 303-696-1971. Here's how today is going to work. We got John Marriott from Larson's coming up, the big swap meet. We're going to keep the professor with us. And at 11 o'clock, Joe Lewis and Billy Conn. What a great book, Boxing's Unforgettable Summer of 41. I am Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS, 63 the high today. My motorcycle's outside. Mountain snow on Sunday, but look at Thanksgiving Day. It's going to be cold on Turkey Day, 38 degrees. Wednesday, light snow in the city. We do the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. We come back on Friday. I get to host the show again, go back and look at the Kennedy assassination with the new material that's there. The Capitalist Law Firm, Danny suggests you choose a lawyer that shares your values because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you, people involved in the case. And Danny, of course, we talk so much about him, talk show host and son of a cop and a great attorney and a former seminarian. And we went through some things with our family a few years back. And Capitalist and I were working together. So I called Dan. His advice was incredible. It was absolutely spot on. He walked us through it, and he would call at night to make sure everybody was okay. The Capitalist Law Firm, serious firm for serious cases. Danny's now with the Nuggets and the Avs. And if you need Dan's help, it's simply a phone call. 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or Capitalist Law, CAPLAS law.com.
I took two things that I love.
$7:10 KNUS. Good morning, everyone. It is a Saturday. I'm Peter Boyles, on the air everywhere. 63 the high. Tomorrow's Sunday, 53 on Sunday. Monday is 43 degrees. This is a big weekend for Larson Ski and Sport and it's today and tomorrow, the 23rd, 24th. And please say good morning. He is a great friend, and his son has become a really great friend. John Marriott from Larson Ski and Sport. Hey, John, good morning and happy Thanksgiving. And let's talk about today and what's taking place tomorrow, if you would.
Well, good morning, Peter. Hey, thank you. Today is our fall ski swap, our November ski swap, and it's absolute chaos down here. We have hundreds and hundreds of people buying all kinds of new and used ski equipment, ski clothing, all kinds of stuff. It's fun. We are having a blast.
There's no place better. It is just an amazing group of people. I've gotten to know everybody, and we'll talk about how this works. If your gear sells, and then how does it all come together? People have so much ski equipment that they no longer use, or they've outgrown with their kids. What do they do with it?
Yeah, so the way the ski swap works, what we do is we provide a forum for that stuff to get moved on to other hands. So if you have old stuff that you're no longer using and you'd like to sell, you can bring it down to our ski swaps, and we will check it in for you. We will try to sell it for you. And if it sells, we give you either 70% of the price it sells for, or we'll give you all 100% if you use it in our store.
Yep.
If you're looking just to buy used stuff, you'll see more used stuff in one place here than you ever will anywhere else, and at great prices. And it's a great way to outfit a family or someone who's just starting, or for people like me who are vintage skiers who are looking for that unique thing from the past that you wish you could have again. You probably can if you come here. You can probably find something you used to really like and have it again.
You got to walk through this place and meet everybody. But again, Larson Ski and Sport is south of I-70. Get off on I-70 on the Kipling exit, come down the ramp, stay to your left, and make a left turn, head south. You go right underneath I-70, then just look to your right. You'll see a big wooden box building. You'll see tons of people out in the yard, and they're setting up stuff. But it is, I don't know, we have been friends for 15, 16, 17 years. I forget. But all the gear, skis, snowboards, winter boots, ice skates, snowshoes, boots, and it's there. And pick up by Wednesday, day after the swap. I don't know what else we want to say. It's just the best, John. It really is.
Well, I'll tell you, Peter, we appreciate your support, and thank you for helping people come down here. We feel so lucky to get to do this, and this year is my 41st year owning this business. So we've been around for a while, and these are some of the funnest days we have, and we just can't wait to see all of our friends and customers. And I have 40 people on staff working today to help you. So it's a highlight of our year for sure. So and we thank you a ton, Pete, for helping us pull this off.
I got to tell you something. John's son's name's Jack, and I've watched him grow, and he may know more about ski boots than anybody I've ever met in my life. So, and plus he's one hell of a skier, and he likes muscle cars. So the kid fits in. He's great. So,
well, I remember, Peter, I can remember you being in the store when Jack was 3 or 4 years old, and him sitting on your lap as we were talking about ski boots or something. And now he's helping you fit your stuff. And Jack's a good kid. A bunch of his friends are here and work here, and they're really turned into professional young men and really dedicated to helping people get what they need to have the best experience they possibly can on the slopes.
John Marriott, Saturday and Sunday, today and tomorrow, south of I-70 on Kipling. It's actually, do I remember, is it 4915? What's the
4715?
4715. Close but no cigar. And it's a confinement sale. It's the busiest day of the year. And go today or go tomorrow. I may see you tomorrow, boss. We'll see what happens.
Sounds good, Pete. I'd love to see you.
Thank you, John. Be safe.
Okay,
bye.
Have a great show.
You too, sir. Bye-bye. Thank you. All right. Now, do we need to take another break? All right. Turn around. We come back with Professor Smith. Stay here. And good morning again, everyone. Saturday, November 23rd, 2024, 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles, Saturday show. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather, warm, dry, and 63 degrees, 53 on Sunday. And next week, I get to work on a work Wednesday. We'll do the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade and also come in work Friday and Saturday as well. Coming up, just an incredible fight book, Joe Louis versus Billy Conn. In the meantime, this is such a treat for me. I've been excited since he said yes. Dr. David Smith, who is professor of history at Baylor University, and we've been doing radio shows together for, I was thinking about that too, Professor. Is it 10 years now? It has to be 10.
It's 10 years. The Audie Murphy book came out in 2014.
Wow. And he's my fallback, and I always fall back on him on topics. He is more than a universalist when it comes to history. And I've been working on this, repetition and watching what I'm watching now with Putin in the United States warning America. And I was thinking about the Lusitania, and I'm thinking about Woodrow Wilson, and I'm thinking about watching these people clash. But Vladimir Putin Tuesday lowers the threshold for a nuclear strike. And it seemed to be, we were talking about the Willie Nicky letters, and they were warning each other, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And their assets, and they kept building and building and building. And then King George, and they're building again. And finally, they pull Woodrow Wilson into it, and of course the Romanovs. And when the smoke settles, there's really nothing left, is there?
Right. By the time World War I is over, you've had the Russian Empire, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire completely erased from the map. And all of Europe winds up getting redrawn, especially, Eastern Europe, that place where, a Central Europe that is anchored by Germany, from there east to Russia, has always been a very problematic place in terms of strategy and diplomacy. And it was completely rewritten after the war.
As well as the Middle East.
As well as the Middle East, right. You had just one empire that covered the Middle East as we think of it, and then in its place was created this patchwork of made up states, basically, that Wilson and his attendants thought could be created by drawing lines on a map.
Yeah. And those people, and so many of us, and it's a favorite film of mine, Lawrence of Arabia. I'm a big Lawrence fan and read a bunch of stuff about Lawrence. But remember, I forget who the actor was, some British actor playing a well-educated Arab prince king, and he speaks in that very British clipped, and he deals with Lawrence, and he deals with these people, and then the film ends, as you pointed out. Lawrence is in the car, and he sees these guys going the other way. Well, that guy's the odd guy out, and what do the British do with him? They make him the king of Iraq. And they put him on the throne. And then the British start killing Kurds, and they're gassing Kurds, and they're machine gunning Kurds. And they got Farouk ends up on the throne in Egypt. And that has nothing to do, the Arabs have nothing to do with this, do they? Have nothing.
No.
Talk to that.
It was a solution imposed from the outside, which so much of 1919 was. And it was a solution imposed on the outside by people who thought they knew better, and that their system of making sense of the world, of organizing the world, was the one that they wanted to see in the ascendancy. So they just remade the world according to how they thought it should be made, and ignored the reality on the ground, that reality that that we've been saying that Lawrence himself at least knew.
And, part of Lawrence's life is that first Lawrence is gay, but then he also, how many different name changes did he have before he was killed, before he died on a motorcycle? I mean, he became different people.
I don't know.
Yeah.
He was someone you think is probably damaged by his experiences.
Oh.
And he coped with it as best he could.
Yes. I mean, I'm a fan. In the end, I've read that biography where he's in Damascus, and the French army's marching into Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
And then the French believe it or not, the French have the power to give Syria to the British. How can, I'm always stunned by that. You mean we can take your country, we can give it to another country?
It's outrageous, isn't it? When you really get into the going back and forth, the way that the British and the French treated the Middle East is sort of just beyond belief, right? That they felt like they were the ones who could create the pieces and then move them to their benefit.
And they did it after the Second World War again. handing the French back Indochina.
Yeah.
Just all of this. Well, as the study of history goes, and so
Yeah.
how does that model get broken? Because we were talking about Bush and Cheney doing it again.
Yeah. The thought that you and I both have, I think, is that if people just read more history thoughtfully, the world would be a better place and people would understand things better. I was thinking over the break, that while you were talking to the other people, I was thinking, what would I want people to do to understand the world better? And I thought, I want them to read history.
Yes.
I want them to pick up Barbara Tuchman and read The Guns of August, because we're talking about the same stage now,
Yes.
a century later, but it's still the same stage. It's
Yes.
still the same complexities. And if you know how these things play out in the past, you'll at least be more cautious.
And I began, and it's one of the things I'm going to do this afternoon, is I'm reading Brand's new book, America First, Lindbergh and Bora and Franklin Roosevelt, and I'm thinking, are these the American firsters?
Yeah,
they're here now with us again too.
They're back again,
yes.
and they're no less dangerous now than they were then. And you can parse the impulses that lead people to be America Firsters with quotation marks around that. And they're understandable impulses, but that still doesn't make it right. The complexity of the world is such that isolationism is not possible. And it wasn't possible in the 30s, and Roosevelt knew it.
Yes.
But Lindbergh thought he could make a career of it.
I didn't realize the closeness of Lindbergh with the Nazis. They were going to build a house in Germany, in Bavaria, he and his wife. Pieces
of that, and enough to think that there was something there. But yeah, that's incredible.
The other part of this, and by the way, Professor David Smith is with us. He is undoubtedly one of the greatest guests I get the chance to have on radio shows. It's going to be 63 today for a high. And then there's imperialism, and now we have the multinational corporations, and the imperialism, the imperial competition that pushes these countries towards adopting alliances, and then there's colonies, and they also brought the nations who would otherwise not interact into the conflict, into the agreement. I read about 6 months ago about the Russo-Japanese War.
Yeah.
And they're all shocked because white guys get beat by yellow guys. That was the big fallout. Was, what do you mean non-white people could beat white people?
Yeah, the victory in Japan in the Russo-Japanese War was a shocker to the West, and it was especially a shocker to the Russians.
And that's Nicky Romanoff.
Yeah.
So, from reading, it's been suggested that Germany is motivated by imperial ambitions to all of this, and isn't the first invasion is they go into Belgium, right? The Germans cross into Belgium.
Yeah, the German army crosses into Belgium in 1914 with the understanding that Germany can fight off France and Russia on opposite sides one at a time. So they have to beat the one who's going to be ready first, and that's France. So they wheel in through Belgium to try to catch the French army from behind, basically. And the Belgians put up a fight. The Belgians have the gall to fight to defend their own country.
Yeah.
And then when the Germans finally finish hacking their way through Belgium and enter France, the British army is there waiting for them now, because the British had agreed to protect Belgian neutrality.
And then, but I'm going to come back to, if I could, I'm bouncing around the assassination. So Ferdinand and his wife, they're murdered. They're murdered in a place called Sarajevo by a Bosnian Serbian nationalist terrorist. They were the original Black Hand, were they not?
That's what they called themselves, yeah.
And so they kill Ferdinand, and they kill his wife. But it takes how long before the war actually starts from
It's weeks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's let me think about that. He was killed on June 28th, 1914, and the armies crossed the frontier in is it the first week of August? So it takes
So,
a whole month, right? It takes a whole month for all of the diplomacy and all of the prevarication and all of the mobilization to start to play out as Europe feels like it has one last chance to sort of avert catastrophe.
great historians, and I think you're one of them, have pointed out always that a successful war, if there is such a thing, needs an aim, AIM. Lyndon
Yeah.
Johnson had no aim in Southeast Asia. Richard Nixon had no aim in Southeast Asia. FDR did have a war aim. Stalin
Yeah.
had a war aim. Um, I was there a war aim in any of this?
It's very difficult to figure out exactly what end state German strategists thought they were going for. Some countries like Russia just wanted to crush Austria,
Yeah.
and Austria wanted to crush Serbia, which is not much of a detailed, policy other than it's clearly enunciated. But war planners talk about, the goal, the purpose, the ultimate, the what you want this war to achieve, and the more closely that can be delineated, the better strategies can be crafted to bring that about. But when you have these open-ended goals, like remaking the Middle East, you're not going to be able to have a clear strategy, and you're going to have drift, and you're going to have wars that last forever.
Yeah. And it takes about a week or 10 days. And then it's Russia, Belgium, France, Great Britain, and Serbia lining up against Austria, Hungary, the Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, and the Ottomans. And World War I now begins.
That's it, yeah. And you've got the Western Front as fighting bogs down on the Western Front between the Germans and the British and French. And then you've got things like, the Gallipoli invasion in the Ottoman Empire carried out by the British Empire to try to outflank that stalemate on the Western Front. And then you've got all the stuff going on at sea because the Western Front has stalemated and nobody knows how to break that stalemate.
And what happened at Gallipoli so affects Winston Churchill that he's afraid of Normandy.
Absolutely, yeah. Talk about history,
Yeah, there it is.
Winston Churchill gets so burned by the failure at Gallipoli that the next time this thing comes around, he's gun shy about putting troops across the beach.
Would the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, would that have happened without the First World War?
Well, it certainly wouldn't happen the same way. I think that something would have happened because there was too much in Russia that could only be addressed by a revolution. And you've got a great deal of energy within the revolutionary movement. And you have the revolution in 1905, which was helped along by the Russo-Japanese War. And Russia gets a parliament then. But the revolutionaries, much like the French revolutionaries, look upon 1905 as an unfinished revolution. But what World War I does for Russian revolutionaries is it gives them the opportunity to show the mass of the people what's wrong with the government as it still is.
And then there's the armistice with Germany. Trotsky goes and meets them at Brest-Litovsk. They make the deal, and then that frees the German troops to face the remaining allies, and then America comes into the war.
Exactly. And, you have Franklin Roosevelt, who was in Wilson's, administration during World War I. Franklin Roosevelt in World War II is scared to death that the Soviets and the Germans are going to repeat that separate peace. And he wants to keep the Russians in. He wants to keep the Russians happy because he doesn't want to have a replay of World War I. Roosevelt knew his history.
Hey, indeed. I'm an FDR fan. So then comes Lusitania, and now the U.S. is in the war. And
have you read Eric Larson's book about the Lusitania?
No.
It's called Dead Wake.
Whoa.
The final crossing of the Lusitania, and it plays out against the background of World War I. It's a fascinating book, and even my students like it.
Wow. I'm writing it down.
Yeah, Eric Larson, Dead Wake.
Wow. I think he wrote The Devil in White City, I think, did he not?
Exactly. Yeah, he wrote
Yeah, I
Devil
met
in
him.
White City.
Yeah, I met him. Yeah.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah,
That's
a long time ago when The Devil in White City showed up. Yeah. Ugh. Where do the Italians play out in all of this?
You know, when the war starts, Italy is allied with Austria-Hungary and Germany in the Triple Alliance.
Mhm.
I mean, Italy is the three of the Triple Alliance. And after the war starts, Italy leaves that alliance basically because Italy has a bone to pick with Austria over the region around Venice and Trieste. So what role does Italy play?
Yeah.
Not, I don't want to say no role, but it's definitely a secondary theater as the Italians engage with the Austrian army, which is also engaged with the Russian army and the Serbian army. So the Italian front bears more on the war with Austria than it does with the war with Germany.
Does that give rise to Mussolini as the war gave the treaties, or the Versailles gives rise to Hitler?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, in as much as Mussolini comes to power in the 1920s with the grievance that Italy wasn't given its fair share of the victory in World War I. Italy and Japan were both, at the end of the war, were both on the Allies' side, and neither come out of World War I thinking that their contributions were rewarded. And they both campaign, the Italians and the Japanese campaign against the Versailles settlement and want to revise it. And they were on the winning side, which is ironic.
And this young...
and that takes us back to Britain and France, thinking they can redraw everything themselves and cut out all the other people who are at Versailles.
And then this young guy shows up named Ho Chi Minh.
He's there too.
He
right?
wants to talk to them. Wilson won't talk to him.
I mean, is history anything other than a catalog of missed chances?
Nothing. The
whole future would have been different.
Yeah, there's a great line. Donald Trump wanted to build hotels in Gaza, and which would have offered employment and everything that was going to go with that. And the Palestinians said no. And I have a friend who's Palestinian who said, there's a motto. And I said, what is it? And he said, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I thought that was, and that's like so now we have past 1,000 days of the Ukraine war, and Russia includes a broader definition now. And we have aircraft and cruise missiles and the drones, the unpiloted drones, and the war is entering a phase where I'm such a rookie historian, but it could be the final, most dangerous phase of all of this, and that's why I'm asking you: does this have World War II written all over it, or World War II, World War I written at least part of it?
It's hard not to see similar complexities leading to unintended consequences being a very distinct possibility here in 2024, 2025, as it was in 1914. I think you're right. I mean, we need to figure out ways to mitigate unintended consequences.
Yes.
And I think we do that by understanding complexity. And guess where that takes me?
To
understanding history.
Yes.
People need to listen to you because you read books.
Right. I got some guy sent me a text that told me to get off the air. And Joe Biden is allowing the Ukrainians to use U.S. missiles in Russia. Why now?
Why now is a good question. And that's the question that everybody's sort of trying to figure out, right? And the consensus is that he's allowing this now to try to let the Ukrainians get a little bit of leverage that they can use into 2025 when the presumption is that there will be negotiations. Something that has a really rich historical tradition, right?
Yes.
If you know that the negotiations are going to happen, what you want to do is grab as much as you can before, because you'll have a better position at the table after.
That's Joe Stalin. It's like, watch this. Move that fat British guy out of here. Now it's me and you. And that's pretty much what they did too. They just, well, you don't count anymore. So, I mean, my own feeling is that the Biden administration's decision is a mixture of all the stuff that you and I've talked about for like an hour and 20 minutes or so. But these missiles, which they have a range of about 190 miles, I read about this last night. And why now? I mean, Biden's short, and the U.S. weapons in Russia ever since. And like I asked you this early on, do you really think that the DOD is allowing these to be in? I mean, this is the biggest stuff that. And now, of course, by the way, I want to mention this, and I'm making notes to myself. There's 10,000 North Korean soldiers have now pushed in too, and that's really more of a World War I thing as well.
Yeah, it's astonishing that North Korea is now a player in this.
Yeah,
but like I said, the consensus is that this was okayed at this point in order to give the Ukrainians a little more leverage at the eventual negotiating table, perhaps with the ability of theirs to hold that Kursk region maybe a little bit more securely, and then maybe trade Kursk for Donbass or Kursk for Crimea or something like that when the peace negotiations finally begin to come together.
And I read the Trump people, and they Donald Trump says he can end this. Okay.
Indeed, he does.
Yeah, no, he does. He says he can end this one, and he can intervene in the Middle East, which is even more frightening because I'm serious. I mean,
I know.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm laughing at the presumption, right?
Well,
history is full of people who have said, "I and I alone can fix this."
Yes, but the Ukrainians and the Russians have to agree that it's fixable.
Right. Yeah, they've got to both get to the point where they see more advantage in negotiation than they do in escalation.
And Joe Biden is, like I said, he's into the night in January. He's gone. Putin's going to be there till the day he dies, I think. And who knows about inside of Ukraine? And then the Poles are worried, the French are worried, the Germans are worried. It really does sound like what Barbara Tuchman said, guns of August.
Yeah, that you've got enough unknowns, and you've got enough anxiety, and you've got enough presuppositions of how things will work, that you've got, the danger is that you start to see a lockstep being dragged toward war without any recourse of stopping it.
Thank you for your time this morning. I mean, I was going to call you when there was a call you at the house. Dr. Smith, I can't tell you how bright David Smith is. So,
Peter, come on.
No, truly. And so now look, I mean, World War I is really the first major conflict. Really is a war at war. The world at war. World War II as well. Now, I know asking people to predict is probably the wrong thing, but how the hell are we going to get out of this?
I don't know. I don't. Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, we hope that cooler, more well-informed, longer perspectives have a seat at the negotiating table, because you want to make sure that there's not escalation, and you want to make sure that there are benefits visible from both sides. All parties need to see that benefits from resolution beat out benefits from escalation.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to make people see.
Yeah, and that's sort of what's in it for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what's in it for me? Everybody's got to feel as though they get something, because history is replete, as you know, with peace agreements that leave one party feel aggrieved, and that's not something that lasts.
And that was the Germans at Versailles.
And then we get a sequel. Right?
Oh,
World War II.
Almost every time.
Yeah.
And somebody brought up Kaiser Bill. Kaiser Bill went to Holland. He just
lived the rest of his life in exile.
He absolutely did. And I don't know where any of the Habsburgs went. The Romanovs went to Ekaterinburg and were shot. Think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there are still Habsburgs here and there.
Somewhere.
They live as private citizens.
Yeah. Did they
live amongst us.
Did they actually create a disease? I mean, I was having a conversation with a friend about it, that they intermarried each other, to each other for generations to keep the power. Yeah. Did they?
That goes all the way back to Charles V.
Yes.
In the 1500s, when they referred to the Habsburg disease as the conditions that he had.
The bleeders. They were bleeders.
Yeah, they had all sorts of health problems, both interior and exterior.
And Nikki's wife is a German, and she brings the gene, and that's where the Tsarevich is a bleeder, and that opens the door to Rasputin. I love this stuff.
Good Lord, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, he was a hemophiliac, and that opened the door to holy cow. Yeah.
How much? Well, they were Habsburgs because of that, right? Did they actually create the disease? I mean, were they responsible for the disease of hemophilia? I
don't know about that. I'd have to defer to my medical history colleague.
I've read that like what they kept doing, brothers and sisters kept getting married so they wouldn't let the power get away from them, and they create these children, and the Tsarevich may have been like an offspring of that.
I now have a question to ask my colleague who does medical history after Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. We're going to do this again ASAP. Professor,
let's not let as much time go by again.
I promise.
Before we talk.
I just think the world of your work, and I don't know. Enough said. But happy Thanksgiving. You got someday, sometime, someplace we go hang out for a weekend. I'll let you talk. And
I really want that. I want to come up there and see you in person and do this in the same room with you.
You know what? You could be a talk show host. I mean, I don't think I could do what you do, but you could do this job so quickly, so easily.
Because I've been studying you for 10 years.
Take care. The best to your family, Professor Smith. Thank you for your time. You too.
Bye-bye, buddy.
From Baylor University, David Smith. We got open lines for half an hour, 303-696-1971. I love stuff. Do you see the lineup on Putin issuing warnings to the United States? And why? Joe Biden's own party didn't want him. I mean, I just can't get over that. His own party didn't want him, and now he has the power to give this technology to the Ukrainians. His own party didn't want him. 303-696-1971. Then coming up, Joe Lewis and Billy Conn. I can't wait for that. It is that time. David Ellis, Cherry Creek. Gift giving time is here. You heard me telling you about taking valuables to David Ellis Jewelers to get a fortune in cash, secure appraisals from David for all the valuables that you have tucked away in your home. It's still true. And share the reasons. I mean, just in case you don't have a Rolex watch or rare coins or a silver tea set, see David for all the most meaningful gift-giving occasions. Christmas is coming. Holidays are here. David Ellis Jewelers, the right item for just the right price for very, 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 very special people. The antique watches, emerald pendants, gold necklaces, diamond rings, trusted jeweler. David's just my friend, buying precious metals and antiques for decades. Dazzling cases and filled with hundreds of new and used pieces for your loved ones to treasure. For real, visit David Ellis to see for yourself. Look for the black awning on the corner of 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. He's there this morning, 6 days a week. Explore DavidEllisJewelry.com or call David 303-322-8779, 303-322-8779. Tell David Ellis Peter Boyles sent you. Better believe it. Morning, everybody. Saturday, November 23rd, 2024. Good old 710 KNUS. The weather, motorcycles outside, 63, warm and dry, 53 tomorrow. I'm going to work this week. I'm going to work Wednesday, the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. I come back on Friday, and the anniversary has slipped by again on the murder, the assassination, the hit of Jack Kennedy. We'll get people on. We'll talk about that, and then I come back on Saturday morning. Robbie Farrell is going to be on the show with us here in a little bit from Mile High Harley Davidson. Children's Hospital's Colorado Toy Run is Sunday, December the 8th, and we'll talk more about that in the book. Joe Lewis and Billy Conn. In open lines, here we go. We go to Ralph. Ralph, you're on the radio show. It's Saturday morning, and good morning.
Peter, I think you're going back to Tuckman and the tripwire wars is something that we've forgotten about 100 years later. The problem was you don't know what the tripwire is connected to, and you don't know what other nations' tripwires are connected to. You had direct...
Yeah, and that's World War I.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, and that's why you're so much, I think, on point right now, is you mentioned in talking with the professor that Kaiserville and the Tsar were in direct communication.
They all were. They went on vacations together.
Precisely. But the thing is, when World War went right at the end of July, they were in direct communication and they were trying to talk each other out of what would cause a tripwire to cause another tripwire to go to war. And we have a theory these days that the hotline between Washington and Moscow is our safety net.
That was Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy put that in, or Jack and Khrushchev put that in.
Precisely. It has, and how shall I say? It has been used, I'm certain. It is being used, and it can be used. But the problem is, it does not assure that a tripwire is not going to blow something up.
Well, that was Tuckman's point, was that all of these things are poised to go, militarism and imperialism and all those different things, and then Sarajevo happens, and that's the trip. But why? Well, let me jump into modern U.S. stuff. Joe Biden is allowing the Ukrainians to use the U.S. missiles in Russia. Why now?
I don't know. Let me give you a flip, but let me give you a flip answer.
All right, okay.
He's simply, how shall I say, passing a brown paper bag to Donald Trump that Donald Trump passed to him on Afghanistan. Our presidency assumes that when a person comes into office, he can change everything. Well, he can't.
Well, what happened in Afghanistan, in fairness, what happened in Afghanistan was not the repeat in Vietnam. The ARVN army holds in Vietnam. The Afghan army handed their weapons over to the Taliban, and Trump had no idea they were going to do that. When they made the Dora deal, they weren't dealing with the government in Kabul. They were dealing with the Talibs. And when Henry Kissinger makes the deal, he makes it with a guy by the name of Lee Dak-to, who's directly connected to the government in Vietnam. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that...
Actually, Peter, that's not quite true.
Oh, well, I'm pretty good at this.
According to Asia Times and according to a number of other sources, the deal that Kissinger cut was with Zhou Enlai in China. And what Kissinger told China was, if you allow us to pull out U.S. troops and you get the Vietnamese to allow us to pull out troops, then we don't care what happens after a decent interval. That was CIA agent, station chief, Snaps.
Well, with respect, Nixon wanted this buffer called peace with honor. They wanted the POWs out. And the Lee Dak-to and Kissinger actually get the Pulitzer Prize for Peace, and they cut the deal in Paris. And the government of Tu and Key, they held, but the government in Kabul didn't hold 30 seconds, and they literally handed their weapons over, American-made weapons. They handed them to the Talibs, and at that point, it's over. And I know that Biden took heat for it, but it's so convoluted, but that they wanted to believe, like we said to the professor, do you think any of these people ever cracked a book, ever sat down with somebody and said, explain Afghanistan or explain Saddam or explain whatever the hell you want to explain. No, they never listened to anybody. They're the arrogance of Cheney and the arrogance of George W. Bush. They're, Ralph, for Christ's sake, they're war criminals, what they did. And the lies that were told. And, you know, I don't know if I hang it on Biden as much as people do. And it certainly isn't Trump. He made the deal. And thinking, but everybody believed that the Afghan army would be like the Arvins and they would hold. Well, they didn't. And then Biden, they'd make Biden try to look like a fool. And now I ask you this question: why now is Joe Biden letting the Ukrainians use U.S. missiles? Your final thoughts, please.
My final thoughts were, I was in Vietnam, and I was, how shall I say, not at the front lines. We knew the Arvin would not hold. We knew it. The only question we had was how long before they folded. They folded 2 years quicker than we expected. So that's my answer.
All right. Well, I mean, any answer is, probably reasonable, but I mean, these guys were banking.
History repeats itself.
Oh, that's why we had the professor on. But those guys, all those mandarins, they're banking in Hong Kong, they're banking in San Francisco, they're banking in Singapore, they're banking in London. They know they're going to run. I mean, just what they do with their money is enough to tell you. It's like the so-called white Cubans that banked in Miami. Or where do you think the wealthy Afghans and wealthy Iraqis put their money? The
same place the wealthy South Vietnamese put there.
That's right. That's right.
U.S., Swiss, Cayman Islands if you had to.
Because they're getting ready.
That's right.
Where do you think all right, last question, I'm getting yelled at here. Where do you think Ukrainians are banking now?
Probably Europe.
London? Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Or Switzerland, even better, Switzerland.
Well, yeah, Switzerland is in Europe, but well, let's put it this way. Switzerland may not be big enough. Ukraine is a big country.
No, but banking. Where do you think
I know, but the number of, how shall I say, the number of rich people is some direct or indirect relation to the amount of people in the country and the country's resources, and the amount of money that we've given them we've given people over the last century.
They steal it. It goes without saying. Ralph, I love your calls. I'm being told I got to pause. 303-696-1971. Stay here. Morning, everybody. Saturday, 23rd of November, 2024. Beautiful day, 63 and warm. I'll be here for the Imaginary Thanksgiving Day Parade Wednesday. Coming up, the book, Joe Louis and Billy Conn. We go to Mike on line one. Mike, you're on the radio show Saturday, man. Good morning.
Thank you. Love your show today.
Thank you, brother.
On the Lion Fred Curry. With wrestling, I'm sorry.
All right, I didn't know where you're going here. Help me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Right.
I told him. But Lion Fred Curry, you never mention him. Or Haystack. Go ahead.
I didn't know. I knew who Haystack was, but I never worked with those guys. They were when I was a little guy.
Oh, okay. See, I was a little guy too.
Yeah.
And I'd sit beside the ring. My grandpa worked in the locker room.
Wow.
And he used to laugh when I'd start crying.
Where was this location?
Saginaw, Michigan.
Oh, okay. All right.
And he worked the back room, so he'd always take me. I'd be in the front row.
Oh, yeah.
In the old seat with his pointed toes and his ball on the end, and the Sarge, and Haystack, and Fine Fred Curry. Nobody talks about him.
There's so many minor guys. I'm coming up on time, but I certainly remember Haystack's Calhoun. We go to Robert. Robert, you're on a radio show. It's Saturday. We got about 4 minutes.
Good morning, Pete. I'll try and keep it short. The discussions about history are great because they give you a kind of a context for the things that are going on today. But in direct response to your query about why now, with regard to Biden authorizing the use of long-range missiles, couple of things, and I think these are mostly closer to home. Our defense contractors have a massive financial vested interest in making sure that this war continues.
They have for the longest time. It's the industrial complex.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And exactly. Eisenhower warned about it, even though he was part of it. But I think that's answer number one. And answer number two is we can argue about whether Biden's actually calling the shots or not, but whatever.
Actually, in fairness, I'm not so sure he is.
I don't think he is either. But I mean, that's a whole nother long discussion.
Indeed.
About who's actually pulling the strings.
Fair enough.
Whoever's making the call right now knows that when Trump comes into office, there is a very good chance that he's going to try and put a very quick end to this war, which really would be in everybody's best interest. But if he can drag us into a deep enough quagmire that becomes difficult, it becomes drawn out, it becomes very hard for us to shut it down. Well, everybody keeps making money. And when those this is a rinse and repeat thing.
Mm-hmm.
Congress authorizes money to be sent over to Ukraine. Ukraine basically uses that money to buy American weapons. Defense contractors made those American weapons.
Sure.
And then Congress is going to authorize more money, and you're going to keep going around.
Absolutely.
And, of course, you got the defense contractors and the other lobbyists that are saying, hey, Congress, here's a couple of $1 million. Vote for more.
Of course. Of course. We've talked about it for years.
It's entirely cyclical.
Yeah.
And so if whoever's calling that shot makes it really hard for us to get out of it, and instead of Trump being able to negotiate directly or indirectly a peace within, let's say, 6 months after he's inaugurated, just to use a number, if they can drag that number out to 12 months, you're making a whole lot of money.
Well, here,
that's 6 more months of the great train dripping.
But it's frightening, and what dawned on me to cut the promo and then ask the professor on is Joe Biden's own party doesn't. I mean, it begs into your question. Joe Biden's own party didn't want Joe Biden. They didn't trust Joe Biden. They don't think Joe Biden's oars were in the water. Now, how and why has Joe pivoted to allow the Ukrainians to use the U.S. missiles in Russia? And I wrote this down on my worksheet. Why now? He's short. And I haven't seen him on TV. I saw him in the Amazon on that bizarre thing when he walks into the weeds. I've seen that. But and no, sir. I mean, serious. This is a guy.
No, I know. I've seen it. It was actually really funny. He has no clue where he is.
No, he doesn't. But so
yeah.
he's giving these missiles. I wrote this down for whatever it's worth. They're called ATACMSs, and they got about 160, 170 miles. These things can stretch to Moscow from the Ukrainians, and 190 miles. I just looked at my notes. 190 miles. They could be used, And Robert, why? I mean, I try and ask myself. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Again, we go back to dragging it out. If you think about this, 3 weeks ago, pretty much the entire establishment was certain that after years of lawfare and years of calling Trump a Nazi and a Hitler and a fascist and a dictator, and they were almost certain that Kamala was going to win. Or if they weren't certain, they were very hopeful. And they knew that if that happened, I mean, let's face it, Kamala's not all that bright either. They knew that if that happened, it was status quo. Okay, there were going to be no peace talks. We were just going to keep funding the cycle, and everything would continue as it is. But after Trump won, they had to recalculate.
Yeah, can I ask you?
How do we drag this now?
Yeah, let me pop you 2 questions before the end. Do you think Putin and Trump are talking on the phones as we speak?
If they're not, they should be.
Do you think he's talking?
And I think, yes, they are.
All right, I do too. Do you think he's talking to Netanyahu?
Oh, you betcha. If not daily, then every other day.
So what are they? I agree with you again. So Donald Trump at this point, I believe, is president of the United States pro tem or acting or whatever it is that he's doing.
Sure. For all intents and purposes, yes.
Wow. And so here we go again. And so,
well, and it's an effort by the current administration to undermine that to the greatest degree possible before he actually takes power.
But I no longer believe in such things as administrations. I really don't. I've been, looking at this for so long and reading so much that these are just power exchanges more than anything else.
And that's entirely plausible. It is. And I think that's one of the reasons that they don't like Donald Trump is because he threatens to kick that right in the kneecaps and say no. And I'm not saying Donald Trump's a great guy.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Disruptor.
No, I understand what you're saying.
He's a great disruptor.
Listen,
pisses everybody off.
I got 30 seconds. Robert, well said. I know we've had some great calls over the years. Thank you so much for this one, man. Thank you, brother.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
All right. Now, on the other side, this is a book, and I'm me finding books, Joe Louis versus Billy Conn. I grew up in Pittsburgh and knew Billy Jr. and used to see Billy come into bars with a guy named Joey Divins. And what a story this is about. He gets in the ring with the Bomber, with Joe Louis. And I'm going to ask him also what he thought about, was it a work or a shoot, that fight the other night with Mike Tyson. I think that was a total work. So let's do a quick turnaround. We're going to talk about Children's Hospital Toy Run. It's Sunday, December the 8th. This coming up, and it's the Toy Run is on. Rain, snow, or shine. We'll talk about that as well. Hang on your hats. I get to come back on Wednesday and work and do the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade and come back on Friday. I think we'll focus on the Kennedy assassination. Nobody did it this year. So, ready? Hit the button. We come back. The book, Joe Louis and Billy Conn. Good morning again, everyone. It's a Saturday, November 23rd, 2024. Good old 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. 63 the high today and 53 on Sunday. I get to come back. I will do the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade on Wednesday, come back on Friday and Saturday as well. This is a really self-serving hour of radio for me. Please say good morning and welcome to the radio show. Ed Gruver is our guest. His book, Joe Louis versus Billy Conn. And as they said, where I grew up, how yin's doing? How yin's doing, Ed?
Good. How are you?
Where do you live?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Where do you live?
I live in Lancaster now. I'm a native of North Jersey. I grew up just outside New York City.
I grew up in the city, man. I was a burger as a kid, man. And I knew Billy Jr. And and used to see Billy come into bars, and he had a running partner named Joey Divins, the toughest barroom brawler in America.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the Joey Divins stuff?
I know some of it. Yeah,
he scared everybody.
He did. Yep.
And so thousands of years ago, I did a radio show and brought up. And it was about Billy Conn, the Pittsburgh Kid. That's what it was. And I brought up Joey Divins. The next day I get a phone call from town, from the burg. Joey's son called me. And I don't know how they got back to it. I had the best conversation with his kid. We must have have talked for an hour about his dad and Billy and growing up and watching those guys. Man,
Billy was king of Pittsburgh for a while.
Oh, absolutely. I used to, I don't know how much of the town you know, but there's a Hebrew Y in Oakland, and it's a YMHA, and we boxed there. And Billy Jr., that's when they called him Billy Jr. because there's Tim, and what's the other brother's name? There's Tim Conn, who writes with you, and Billy Jr. was a third brother. There was a third brother, and Tim. Okay, just Timmy Conn or Timothy Conn. And
yeah, Tim was gracious enough to do the forward for my book.
Oh, that's right.
He and I have become friends. That was great. I went to Pittsburgh for a family wedding a couple of years ago, and was able to meet Tim in person because we had been corresponding, by phone and by email and everything. So when I told him I was going to be in Pittsburgh, he's like, "Hey, as soon as you get here, let me know." And so he had me into his house to meet his wife. And it was great. And he took me all around Pittsburgh, showed me a lot of the high spots, old Forbes Field and everything. And it was great.
I was just there for a reunion about less than a month ago, and to see guys I grew up with, and it was something. It doesn't change, but and my day, I think every Irishman in Pittsburgh claims they were there when Billy fought Joe. There's this. Yeah. Remember that story about how many people claimed they were in that when Wilt scored 100 points in that game,
and Hershey.
Yes, tell that story.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Well, Hershey actually isn't far from where we are.
Yep.
It's about, maybe a 20 to 30 minute drive, depending on traffic. And in the old Hershey Arena, if you talk to people in that area, like you're right, the arena probably sat maybe, 15,000 tops, but 100,000 people say they were there.
And everybody I knew's dad said they were there to see Billy fight Joe. It couldn't have been.
I had a similar experience. I did a book on the Ice Bowl, the Packers Cowboys famous New Year's Eve game, and went to Green Bay on a book tour. And when I was in Green Bay, again, it was the same thing. Everybody I met was at the game.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh yeah, I was there." But I wish I had known that beforehand. I would have interviewed you for the book.
But Billy and the Bomber, and Joe Louis' son lives here in Denver. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I interviewed him for the book. He was very gracious, very good guy.
He's great. He's great. He's got Ali stories and Bomber stories.
Oh yeah.
Oh, he
told me a great Ali story that at his father's funeral, Ali came up to him afterward and said, hey, look, I always yell about it. I'm the greatest, this and that, and the greatest heavyweight ever, the greatest fighter ever. He said, but really, your dad was the best heavyweight ever.
He told me that same story.
Mm-hmm.
He said at the bomber's funeral,
Mm-hmm.
and I met Joe. Joe, there was Joe had there was tough times in the end, and
right.
There was a guy here who was a Cable King guy, and he was helping take care of Joe, and a guy named Ronnie Lau. They brought Ronnie out of the penitentiary, and I got to know Ronnie really well. And Ronnie had his first pro fight in the old auditorium, and Bill Daniels was the guy's name, and he was taking care of Joe in a way that Joe had been in a hospital here, and you could line up and shake the bomber's hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the line must have been from here to Sharpsburg, as my father would say. And
I'm sure.
And I stood in line and shook Joe Lewis's hand, and said, and his hand. I remember holding his hand in this hand. And then there's that great. Where is it? Detroit, the great. Just his hand is just
the big fist.
Yes,
that big fist. Yes, statue. Yeah.
How good was he? How good was Joe Lewis, Ed?
I think he was the best ever. And I don't get into these, hypothetical matchups. Could Lewis have beaten Ali? Could he have beaten Dempsey or Marciano? Yeah. Well, he fought Marciano, but that was in the end of his career.
It was too late. Right.
Yeah, it was too late. Could he have beaten Tyson? So on and so forth. I mean, those are hypotheticals, but I think the best way to look at someone's career is, what they did against the competition in their era. And Lewis still holds records, longest heavyweight reign, almost 12 years.
Yes.
Most title defenses, 25.
Yes.
And those numbers were impacted by the war and his service overseas. So he would have had, even greater numbers if you just want to measure him statistically. But, the way I look at Lewis, he could knock you out in the first round. He could knock you out in the 15th round. He could
either hand.
He could outbox you. He could he could outslug you.
Yes.
I mean, whatever fight you wanted to fight, he could fight it.
It was like, how good. I mean, Ted Williams was great, but then Ted Williams took time out for 2 different wars, and that book, The Kid, about Ted, he was. And I'm with you. I'm a big fight fan. Can I sidebar you for a second? Ed Gruver's here. This book is wonderful. All right, the Tyson fight, I worked as a ring announcer in pro wrestling. Was that a shoot or a work? Did they fix that thing?
I don't think it was fixed. I think that Mike's 58 years old. And if that had been a normal 3-minute round, I don't think he would have lasted through the 8th round.
Okay.
I thought he looked decent in the first round.
Yeah.
Not so much the second round. And then I think he realized his legs were shot. And you could see from the 3rd round to the 8th round, he was basically just, content to stay on the perimeter just to, stay upright.
Did that kid carry him in those final rounds?
Well, there's a lot of speculation that he didn't want to embarrass Mike or even possibly hurt him because of his respect for Mike. I mean, just before the fight ended, Jake Paul bowed to Mike.
I saw that.
So if he did, I give him credit for that because that's not uncommon. Sugar Ray Robinson carried Henry Armstrong because he didn't want to hurt him at the end of his career.
I feel like Ed Gruver's here. Joe Lewis versus Billy Conn's the book. Lyons Press, Lyons. It's a must read. I used to do a TV gig here in town, and I spent an hour on air with Jake LaMotta and then another hour and a half just sitting around and listening to him talk. And that was all in this same era, a little after it. But we talked about Frankie Carbo. We talked about, the fight that he had to eat. He ate the Fox fight. But that fight the other night, and Mike Tyson's, I'm a geek. Mike Tyson used to throw an uppercut would take your head off. He never threw one uppercut in that fight. No.
Well, after the second round, he wasn't even close enough to throw an uppercut.
No, that's true too.
He was too far back.
God.
But I was fortunate enough earlier in my career, my sports writing career, to cover some of Mike's title fights in Atlantic City. I saw the Spinks fight. I covered his fight against Truth Williams.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was, and the thing about a Tyson fight back then was that, nothing else compares. I've covered World Series and NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, the Stanley Cup, NFL championship games. Nothing compared to the electricity of Mike Tyson in his prime, entering a ring.
Man.
People were just going crazy. It was as close as you can get, I guess, to the old gladiator days.
Mike Tyson, to me, I mean, I'm a huge Tyson fan. I was a custom auto fan. I mean, I used to really, chase and read and listen and try a little bit, but Cuss knew what he was doing. And I think after Cuss died and the King showed up, that was it.
Yeah, things kind of went sideways for Mike after that.
Man. What's Don King doing now?
I think he's just in retirement, as far as I know. Yeah.
I mean, right after Ali and everybody bowed to Joe Louis. You have to, don't you? I mean,
oh, sure. I mean, not only for what he did in the ring, but also for what he did, his service to the country during the war. And a lot of people either forget or don't know that he donated 2 of his championship purses to the Army and Navy relief funds.
And then the IRS came after him.
Yeah, then that was a tragedy. That should never have happened.
That was horrible. He had to do those tax fights. Was Marciano a tax fight?
I would assume it was, because again, it would turn out to be the last fight of his career.
Yes.
And he was on the quote unquote comeback trail, but it was something he never really wanted to do. I mean, first fight back, he fought as a Charles, took a pretty bad battering.
Yes, he did.
Went to a 15-round decision, but he just kept fighting for money, trying to make up those financial losses. And the Marciano fight, Rocky himself
he felt bad. He felt
afterward. Yeah,
felt bad.
Because Louis was his idol.
Yeah,
he didn't want to fight Louis.
No, and he said something about. And I'm a Marciano fan. He said something like, "I hope I can be half the man that." How old was Joe when Joe took that fight? I mean, Joe was
mid-30s.
Had to be
mid to late 30s. Yeah. And
there were tax for the people that don't know. By the way, Ed Gruver's with us, and I hope not for the last time. He's a wonderful guest. The book, Joe Louis versus Billy Conn, and it's really set in Pittsburgh, but because it focuses on Billy, but it's really the bomber, and it's my dad and his brothers and everybody growing up, and we would see Billy. And I'm going to go when we take a pause. I'm going to go off air and tell you a story that my brother was a pretty good boxer, and he has a story about Billy Conn. But we would see Billy and Joey Divins, and there's a part of Pittsburgh called Oakland and Shadyside.
Sure,
man. Yep. Well, I when I was a little boy, my dad rented the bottom of a triplex off of Negley Avenue. And so we were right in the heart of where all those, all the Irish were. And Billy was an idol.
No question.
What was, because it's been a while since I read your book. What was his father-in-law's name? Jimmy. And he fought his father-in-law, I thought.
Yeah. That postponed the second Louis Conn fight till after the war, because he got into his kitchen fight with his father-in-law, broke his hand.
Yeah, it's Greenfield Jimmy.
Greenfield Jimmy. Yep.
Yeah. And they talked about Greenfield Jimmy too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that caused them to not fight again until 46. Then after that, both guys then were past their prime.
Do you remember? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's one of the things I found. And I knew all about this fight, of course, because in one way, this book is kind of an homage to my father, because when he was growing up, then when he came of age, he lived in Newark, New Jersey, and so New York wasn't a far trip for him. He'd just go right across the bridge. But he would go and see these guys in person. You know, he saw the Lewis fight. He didn't see this fight in particular, but he saw Conn fight at the Garden. He saw Sugar Ray Robinson. He saw two-ton Tony Glento. I mean, he saw all these guys.
Yes. Wow.
When I was growing up, these are the stories that I would hear. You know,
how old are you? How old are you?
I'm 64.
Okay.
Yeah. So he would tell me all these stories, you know, about Lewis and Conn.
Yes.
Sugar Ray Robinson.
Yes.
All these guys. And Harry Greb, another favorite.
The Pittsburgh Windmill, Harry Greb.
Pittsburgh Windmill.
Yeah, Harry Greb.
And, you know, my father, you know, God rest him, is no longer with us. But, you know, this book is kind of, like I said, an homage to all the stories that he would tell me about these great fighters when I was growing up.
I tried, wasn't any good, but Wednesday night on it was Pabst Blue Ribbon bouts Wednesday night, and Friday nights were Gillette razor blade fights, Gillette Cavalcade of Sports. And that was probably one of the few times I would spend time with my dad, and we would watch those fights. And so, and then my dad would talk about Billy and Harry Greb, and I get on a list of these, you know, these guys that were idols to these, and they were all poor Depression era working class kids. You know, my dad didn't graduate from high school, and but they told a story, and I think you had it in your book about. And I one of my favorite movies is Good Will Hunting. I love that film.
Sure.
And when they're in the car and the opening of it, and they see some kid that they fought in junior high or something. Remember, they jump out of the car and they get in a fight with the guys on the playground that they grew up with, or they knew them, they hated them when they were kids.
Yeah, they go to settle an old score.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I know you know that's true. And and who was it? The guy that was walking down the street, and the old man told the story. I think it's been a long time since I read the book. I'm really pleased that you're with me. But Billy spots the guy, and there's some guy that he had a grudge against, and he came and they fought the guy before he was going to go in the ring and fight. Tell that story? Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to research. Yeah, I would have to go back and look at that again, because it's been a couple of years since I actually even looked at the book. I've had other projects in the works, but just to backtrack real quick, the name did come to me. Greenfield Jimmy Smith.
Jimmy Smith, yes. Greenfield.
Yeah, who was also a fighter, pro baseball player.
And he was a fighter. And
I think one of the interesting things I found in researching this book is, and I didn't know about it as much as I know about boxing history and everything. I didn't realize until I went through the records of some of these old-time fighters connected with this book is that Billy's idol, Harry Greb,
the Windmill,
fought Joe Louis's trainer / idol, Jack Blackburn.
Oh man!
Back in like 1920, and they fought in Pittsburgh in Duquesne Gardens.
And the Gardens.
It was a six-round bout. Greb got what they used to call newspaper decisions back then. And he got a newspaper decision, but it went to full distance, and from all accounts, it was pretty close. And so I just found it really interesting that you have, these two great champions, Lewis and Conn, and their two mentors, so to speak, fought, 20 years earlier.
There are, our guest is Ed Gruver. This book is special, Joe Louis versus Billy Conn. There were fight towns, and
oh, sure.
Philadelphia was a great fight town. Pittsburgh was a fight town.
New York City.
New York. But in the talking to the Bull, and we're sitting there, and I brought up some stuff, and his ex-wife had been in Playboy magazine. That's just about what date this is, and we talked about Frankie Carbo, and we talked about the mob, but that, I don't know if that was ever around Billy and the Bomber at all. Those characters, were they, or the best of your knowledge?
No, they didn't tamper with Lewis, or you try to get close to Lewis or Conn. There's a funny story that I heard through the years that this mob connection, predated even Lewis and Conn. It went back to the 1920s.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a story that some connected guy showed up at Dempsey's training camp once and wanted Jack to take a dive. And instead, I think they ended up carrying the mobster out,
Throwing
knocked cold.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Jack.
Yeah. You're not going to get Dempsey to take a dive. But I think it became really prevalent in the 50s. The connection, Blinky Palermo and some of the other guys.
Yeah.
But another interesting thing is that they never tried to get close to Marciano.
No.
That they knew Marciano was good enough to, win fights on his own. He didn't need anyone's help. He wouldn't have accepted anyone's help.
I agree.
And they wanted Marciano to be, completely above any suspicion, because he was a fellow Italian, and they didn't want any kind of, problems or controversy about Marciano.
I was a Rocky fan as a kid, and Rocky Marciano, and I think I watched was the Lewis Marciano fight on television, to best of your knowledge? Because I
don't recall it being, because I think the only highlights of it are the traditional kind of boxing highlights. I don't know of any broadcasts of that fight. I know there is a broadcast, the closed circuit broadcast still exists of the first Marciano walkout fight when Rocky won the title in Philadelphia.
Fought Jersey Joe. Yeah.
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 I met Jersey Joe once at a Golden Gloves event in Jersey City.
Good guy?
Yeah, very good guy. Very humble, very quiet. Yeah, he was a very nice gentleman.
The closest I ever came to know, and I met Bone Crusher Smith at a sobriety thing, and talked to Bone Crusher a lot. That was a highlight for me. And but there's just something about those guys that are you don't know how good is until you see good,
right?
Until you can get your head kicked in a couple of times, but until you see it.
Up close, yeah.
Stop your heart.
My dad took me to, Ali trained, latter part of his career, he trained in
Pennsylvania,
not far from here.
Yeah.
In Deer Lake, which is outside Reading. So, I think it was prior to his fight with Ernie Shavers.
The Acorn.
My dad and I
fought the Acorn.
Yeah, the Acorn.
Fought the Acorn.
My dad and I hopped in the car and drove out to Deer Lake and watched Ali train that day. And they packed it in. He packed it in every day for that. But he went through his training and everything, and the sparring, but he was a funny guy. He would stand up in the ring and do these long monologues and tell jokes and everything. And he gave the people a lot more than just like a boxing exhibition.
I shook his hand, and I was stunned by how big he was. He was here in town, and it was a handshake. That was to stand in line and shake the champion's hand. But he was a big guy.
He was.
Oh, yeah. And let me set up some questions. Liston Clay 1, Liston, then Ali 2, and because Ron Lau and I talked about Sonny, and there was a television movie made about Sonny, and Ron Lau played Sonny. And they lived here. Sonny lived in Denver.
Right, yes.
And fought with the cops and fought with everybody. But the rumor was that he was mobbed up. And LaMotta told me about the Fox fight, that if he wanted to get the shot, and I think it was the Zale fight, that he had to go into tank for Fox. And so can we pick it up on that? I love having you on, man. You're great. Can you hang on? Let me get through a couple of quick things. Put him on, Adam. Put him on hold if you would. His last name is spelled Gruver, and the book is entitled Joe Louis versus Billy Conn: Boxing's Unforgettable Summer of 1941. Lyons, Lyons Press is his publisher. Danny Kaplis, and he's a great friend and a tremendous lawyer. And Danny suggests you choose a lawyer that shares your values, because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you and everybody in the case. And Dan's dad, of course, was a cop. We've talked about so many different things. He came to the rescue for us. And all I can tell you is, how somebody treats you. And there he was. We had some problems, and Danny stepped in, and he's also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history, Kaplis Law. Now, the official law partner of Nuggets and Avalanche and the Kaplis Law firm, serious firm for serious cases. Dan accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis. He can represent good people from all walks of life without regard to ability to pay. If you need his help, we just want a question answered. 303-770-5551. It's Kaplis. Pick up the phone, 303-770-5551, or hit dankapleslaw.com. Danny, of course, last name spelled Caplis, dankapleslaw.com. Morning, everybody. Just been a great show because of the guests. Saturday, November 23rd, 63, warm and dry, and 53 tomorrow. I'll be back Wednesday, get to work Wednesday and Friday and Saturday of next week. Our guest is really special. The book, Boxing's Unforgettable Summer of 1941, the fight between the Brown Bomber Joe Louis and Billy Conn, the Pittsburgh Kid. Ed Gruver is our guest. His publisher is Lyons, Lyons, and it's in hardback. You were kind enough to go into the first fights, Sonny Liston fights, then Cassius Clay, and then I think he was either Cassius X for the second fight or became Ali by the second fight. Overall, what do you think the truth of those two fights is?
I think the first fight was legitimate. I think when you watched the first Clay Liston fight, Sonny was going all out trying to stop Cassius, and especially when Clay got the liniment, inadvertently off of Sonny's shoulder, and it burned his eyes, and he wanted to quit there, and Angie Dundee pushed him back out. Said, hey,
cut him off, Angie.
Yeah,
cut him off.
And so Liston was really, going all out to try to win the fight and stop Clay, but. One of the things I remember Dave Anderson,
sure,
the Pulitzer Prize sports writer, telling me once that he was ringside for that fight, and he said that one of the things that was startling, and that almost no one really thought about before the fight, was that when the two fighters were brought to the center of the ring for the introductions, the pre-fight instructions, that Clay, at that time he was Clay, was bigger than Sonny Liston, and that really startled Dave and startled a lot of other people. And when you watch the fight, it looks like, Cassius is so, so much quicker and, more modern looking than Sonny Liston. And he really makes, like Mike Tyson said once, he makes Sonny look like he's from a whole different era.
And he was. And he was.
He was.
Yeah.
And, so I think Clay legitimately won the first fight. And Liston said afterward that, people told me this kid couldn't punch. He said, look at my face.
Yeah.
It's all, cut up and bloodied. But the second fight in Maine, there was something definitely strange about that because, there was a punch that did land from Ali. Liston went down, but then what happened after that with him rolling around on the canvas and, the debacle with poor Jersey Joe, who was the referee, trying to, pick up the count and losing track of what the count should be. And, it really has left a lot of questions about, exactly what happened in that fight. And, Ali wasn't really known as a knockout puncher, and Liston was known as a guy who could take bombs. He had fought Cleveland Williams the years before and could take a punch. And, for Ali to knock him out with one punch, I mean, it just seemed like there was something off that night.
There's all kinds of stories about whether or not, Sonny was clearly mobbed up. He was a leg breaker for the mob.
Yeah, he was an enforcer.
Oh, yeah. And much like, he started the fight in prison, I think, if I remember those stories correctly. And the same thing was true with Ron Lau. Ron Lau was in the penitentiary, and he was a catcher on the baseball team. And then one of the corrections officers started him fighting, and he was that good. And he talked about, we had a conversation about fighting Ali. He fought Ali in Vegas. And I've watched it. We sat and watched the fight together a couple of times. And, when does the mob get pushed out? Because we're talking about the Louis Conn fight, and they were not involved, but they were involved in other fights. How did they get involved in boxing? And I like what you said earlier. They were involved in the 1920s.
Yeah. Yeah, anytime there's money to be made, there are going to be people who want to, profit off of that. And, boxing has never really had strict regulations. But, we shouldn't just say it's boxing. Basketball had its,
Henry Hill.
Henry Hill. Yeah.
Henry Hill did it.
From Goodfellas. Yeah. And, baseball, of course, had the Black Sox scandal.
Yep.
So it's not just boxing, but the mob really became entrenched in boxing. Big Jim Norris was the boxing commissioner. and he was reputed to have connections with mob guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Big Jim was in control of boxing in the 50s, that's when the mob connection, I think, really grew pretty strong, and they controlled a lot of the fights. And there's a story that they approached Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray would never put the finger on who actually approached him, but it was a mob associate from Chicago who went to Ray before his fights with LaMotta,
Mm-hmm.
and said, look, you win the first, Jake wins the second, and then the third is strictly on the level.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray said, look, I respect you guys, but I can't do that. I can't throw a fight. And, they respected Sugar Ray enough that they backed off and said, okay, don't worry about it.
LaMotta talked, I don't even know if I can find the tape. I spent an hour with cameras in front of us, and then it was a place called United Cable, and they had like a cafeteria, and we went and sat in the cafeteria and talked, because I think he was on to, I've looked back on that, and that he was on to, like, I knew enough to ask the right questions. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about that, and I asked him about fighting Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to be, when Ron LaMotta said, he talked, like that. And he said, I got so much sugar, it's a wonder I ain't got no diabetes. But he was hilarious.
Yeah.
He was
Oh, yeah.
He was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about him and Graziano.
Mm-hmm.
And they were criminals. They were, and he said, I can't do it. I could try his voice. He said, me and Rock, he said, we was educated criminals. And I'm being a straight man for him. I said, what, champ? He said, we only stole stuff what began with the letter A. And we're on live television. I said, what? And he said, like a bicycle, a quart of milk. And he went down this whole thing. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, he fought everybody. And so did Joe Louis, and so did Billy Conn.
Yeah.
Talk about that. There was, you want to get in line, get in line.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about Billy Conn is that, you look at his record and he had quite a few losses, but you have to do a deeper dive than that, because a lot of those losses came when Billy was, just turning pro. He turned pro at age 16.
Oh, yes.
And he's a 16, 17-year-old kid fighting, veterans of the ring who were mid-20s, pushing 30. Of course he's going to be at a disadvantage. But, his manager, Johnny Ray, who was a stablemate of Harry Greb, who fought all the time.
The windmill.
Greb had close to 300 fights in his career. And that's what they knew. And Johnny told Billy, look, the amateurs are not going to make you any money. We don't need to fight in the amateurs and have you win like a tin watch somewhere to show that you're the best amateur in Pittsburgh or whatever.
Yeah.
We're going to fight for money, and it's going to, school of hard knocks, literally. And so Billy took some losses early, but it was a learning experience for him. And by the time, he got to where he was going to fight Lewis in 41, he and Joe were clearly the best fighters in the world.
Absolutely. Like I said, when those guys, and I caught the tail end of it as a kid, and I don't know, I think, they used to call them club fighters when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we fought in smokers, and that kind of stuff. And looking back on it, what was I thinking? I wasn't any good. It's like, but there was like more of a tradition. I more than anything else.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that. And I need to take a break. I'm going to come off air with you and tell you this story that my brother told me. My brother we still have some fight bills, when my brother's on the undercard. And he was all right. I was, but my brother was a pretty good fighter, and he was on the team. And it's a story about the Stan Szymanski at a Polish Falcon, and the Falcon brings Billy in to talk to the boys before. Oh yeah, let me put him on hold if you would. Let me take a break, and our guest is Ed. And I'll tell Ed to start. I can't tell it on the air. Ed Gruver is our guest. Joe Louis versus Billy Conn, boxing's unforgettable summer of 1941. Saturday, everybody, November 23rd, 2024, 710 KNUS. Beautiful day headed our way. Next hour will be open lines. We'll talk about Children's Hospital Colorado Toy Run. In the meantime, this is a really special guest, Ed Gruver. The book is entitled Joe Louis versus Billy Conn. I told Ed the story off the air. That's my brother's story, but isn't that a great story about Billy Conn?
Very great story. And it sounds just like, you would expect from Billy.
I used to see those guys on St. Patrick's Day. I mentioned that. And he and a guy named Joey Divins. And they would get themselves paged in bars and stuff. And Joey, Saga Magazine, this is like 63, 64. Saga Magazine wrote Joey up as the toughest barroom brawler in America.
Mm-hmm.
And we would see.
I believe it.
Oh. And remember, he goes to work, finally goes to work for the Steelers. He does, works for the Roonies. Mm-hmm. They're all the Irishmen that are down there, and they got him, and he would come in, and he looked like, I saw Joey a couple of times, and I saw him put a guy on top of a St. Patrick's Day. There's a bar called Coins. It was right around the corner from the gym we fought in, and he always wore a white raincoat. And he grabs this guy, and he one-handed sets the guy on top of the cigarette machine. Says, "Stay there."
And I'm sure he did.
And he did. That's one of those mixes. Yep. Everybody dyed their hair green on St. Patrick's Day, and they showed it. And of course, Billy's the idol. I mean, Billy's everybody's idol.
Sure.
How good was Billy Conn?
I think he was the best light heavyweight ever, and I know Joe Louis agreed, and a lot of other people would say the same. I've always thought that Billy and Archie Moore might have been like 1A and 1B.
Yeah, another one.
You can certainly add Roy Jones Jr. to the mix.
I agree.
Michael Spinks, I think, was a very good light heavy. Unfortunately, everybody remembers him for the Tyson fight.
You remember that? You could see
he was a great fighter in his own right.
You could see the fear in his eyes when Tyson got in the ring.
Yeah, I covered that fight.
Oh, did you?
When Michael Spinks took his robe off before the fight, and he had no sweat.
Yeah,
which indicated that he was,
that's right,
fearful.
Yeah.
I said to somebody sitting next to me, "This isn't going to last very long."
Nope,
because he couldn't even warm up. He was so afraid.
The great line when you go to the fights with all your buddies, you're in them or something. Look, bet on the wet guy.
Exactly.
They used to say that, look at the two fighters, bet on the wet guy. If you, and remember when Tyson came in, he just had that towel with the hole cut in it, like he didn't wear socks.
Nope. He had that Dempsey look to him. And he modeled the Dempsey. Dempsey was one of his ring idols. And Tyson modeled Dempsey, the white wall haircut, the shaved sides and, the solid trunks. Now, Dempsey wore white, but Mike, opted for black trunks. But the old style leather black boxing shoes. I mean, no one was wearing those until Tyson came along.
How good was Dempsey?
One of the best. I've always thought that Jack was a top 5 heavyweight of all time. His career, his prime was very short. Because after he beat Willard, he defended his title very rarely over the next few years, and then basically went into almost like a 3-year retirement while he held the title and didn't come out of it till he fought Gene Tunney. And by then, he was no longer the same fighter he was when he beat Willard and, Carpentier and Gibbons and some of those other fighters. Jack's legs were shot by then. He'd been living the high life,
Jack lived well.
He married a movie star.
Yes.
And, did some movies on his own. And, there's a saying, I think you mentioned Rocky Graziano before, and I think it was Rocky Graziano who said it, that, once you become champ, it's hard to get up and do road work at 4 a.m. when you're going to bed in silk pajamas.
Yep. Final story about the guys that try to jump Billy and his wife going to mass. Tell that story, if you would.
Yeah. Well, were they going to mass? Or maybe there was more than one story. I know there was a story where there was a hold up in a store that Billy was at,
I thought it was
he
they
and
were
his wife-
after Mass and they'd gone into the
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. It was after Mass. They were at a local eatery that Billy's friend owned and ran, and they were in there, and these two young guys come in and try to hold the place up, and Billy jumps up out of his seat and knocks them out.
Knocks them both out.
And he was over 70 years old at that time, I believe.
I think Dempsey knocked some guys out too when he was an old
Dempsey
guy.
did as well. Yeah.
He crossed it.
Hey, that's a bad mistake to mix with Billy Conn or Jack Dempsey.
Can you imagine?
One thing about fighters is that they never lose that punch.
Oh,
No. So, yeah.
but everybody like I was gone then, but they said Billy KO'd a couple of guys after Mass, and his wife was with him. And then they had the Dempsey story, and it was outside of his restaurant. I think it was that Dempsey restaurant that's famous in The Godfather, and then they tried to mug Jack.
That's a big mistake.
Funny stuff. What are you working on now, by the way?
Right now, I'm kind of in between projects. I should mention, since we've been talking about Pittsburgh a lot, that I did do a couple of other books. I did a book through University of Nebraska Press. It was a book on the Steelers-Raiders rivalry of the 70s,
Wow.
The Immaculate Reception. And I co-authored that with a gentleman who worked for the Steelers during that Super Bowl era, Jim Campbell.
There's a name.
So he was on the sidelines for all those big Steelers games. He was there for the Immaculate Reception, but he and I worked on that book together, and that's been out now. And I just did another book. My most recent book just came out last month. It's about Ben Hogan's Triple Slam season of 1953.
Oh man!
And the first three chapters of that are not. I'm sorry, not the first three. The middle three deal with Oakmont in Pittsburgh.
Sure,
That's where
right. Yeah.
U.S. Open was that year, and it was Hogan won that tournament. So that's another Pittsburgh-related book that I did.
I forget until I get there, and as soon as you get on the plane and somebody calls somebody a jagoff, you know where you're going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I said it was okay. Your mom's a jagoff. That makes people mad, except for where I grew up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. if you're from there, then you understand. You get it.
Totally get it. And the stories of Billy Conn, and all the stories, the Steelers stories, and look, this door is always open, Ed. It's the greatest.
Oh, I'd love to be back. Yeah.
Oh man, it's the greatest. I'll have you back. I promise. Just to sit and tell stories about these guys.
I look forward to it.
Is Bradshaw crazy? Is he having his hard time? What's going on with him?
I don't know. I mean, he's, Terry being Terry. He's done this for how many years now? I mean, decades, right? It's on the pregame shows and halftime shows, and looks like he's always having a good time up there, and people like that.
I talked to my brother the other day. He said, Bradshaw's a jagoff. Started to laugh. Happy Thanksgiving, Ed. You gave us a great hour and a great time to read, man. Thanks, brother, man. Be safe.
You as well. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. All right, we have open lines on the other side. A lot to talk about. And with Robbie Farrell's coming up from Mile High and Mile High Parker, Harley Davidson. We're going to talk about Children's Hospital Toy Run. So you ready, Adam? All right, let's pull the pin. Now I say good afternoon. It is 5 minutes after 12, and what a great morning. Gosh, principally the guests make the whole thing move, and they were just great guests. Dr. David Smith was on just moments ago. Ed Gruver was on it. Just wonderful stuff. What talk radio is about. Good afternoon. It's a Saturday. 63 will be the high, warm and dry. Got my sicko outside. Go down and see Devil's Head Boys. 53 Sunday, Monday, 43 degrees, maybe snow. But looking ahead on Turkey Day, it's going to be cold. 38 degrees will be the high. But I'll be here on Wednesday to do the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade for the 8 millionth time. I think Billy and I will do it. And then come back on Friday. And we've bypassed the anniversary of the murder of Jack Kennedy. Want to come back and do that. And then Saturday, of course, come back on the show. Please say good afternoon. We've become very, very good friends, and he's out at Mile High in Parker, Colorado. Robbie Farrell joins us in the 39th annual Children's Hospital Colorado Toy Run. Brother man, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, and thanks for coming back up on the show.
How you doing, Peter? Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate you.
No, this is a guy, and the toy run is on. Vinny Terranova and a bunch of these old timers started this thing 39 years ago, and it is just turned into something very special. Robbie, talk about the toy run at Children's.
Sure thing. So this year it's December 8th, coming up on us really quick here. You can register at any one of the Big Iron Motorsports dealerships. That's Mile High Harley Davidson of Parker, Mile High Harley Davidson of Aurora, Grand Prix Motorsports, or Foothills Triumph BMW. And the gates open up at the Aurora Sports Park off of Colfax at 8 a.m. Staging starts. First wave of dignitaries go out at 10 a.m. and then waves continue from there until it's complete. And then this year, for the last few years, we haven't been able to stop at the hospital. It's been a ride through, drop off your toys and go. This year, they have a specific parking lot where we can actually park our bikes, and we still can't go into the hospital, but we can at least go to the front entrance and we can drop our toys off and we can wave to all the kids that are up against the windows and stuff. So that's going to be pretty special this year because we haven't been able to do it for a few years. And then once you get through making a bunch of kids happy, dropping off your toys, You get to go celebrate what we accomplish every year with that over at the Aurora store for the after party.
It's important they're unwrapped toys so that everybody can see them. And how it works, I have a friend who they come in the next day. I didn't realize this. And they set toys by age, and every little kid that comes in, and then his or her brothers and sisters, everybody. So they're unwrapped so the kid can pick his or her own toy. And people that sort them out, they'll sort them out the day after we're done. And I've said this a million times, you do this and you take a look at these little guys, you don't got any problems, do you, Rob? You just don't.
No, you don't.
You just don't.
No, everything else in the world becomes so small, Peter, when you participate in this thing. I'll tell you what. And for me personally, it gives me a high that lasts me a long, long time after participating in the Children's Hospital Toy Run, Colorado. It is just so cool to be a part of something that has been a 39-year tradition. And
there's so many people, and no one cares about what motorcycles you ride or anything like that. And there was one year we did the truck run because there was so much snow, but this is the 39th annual Children's Hospital Colorado Toy Run. It is Sunday, December the 8th, 2024. The run is on, rain, snow, shine, and this guy has been so important, Robbie Farrell. And I see him all the time, so I want you to know just what a good man he is. And so we'll plug it, we'll get it done, and then we'll party on, Earl. I love you, brother. You mean a lot. So be safe.
I love you too, man.
We'll do it next Saturday.
I look forward to riding with you in the dignitary run. So,
I tell you what we're going to do. I'm working. Let me see. I'm working Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday of next week. You come on every day with me. How's that? We'll put it together.
That sounds great, man. Let's do it.
Say hi to everybody. Hey,
I will, Peter. Take care.
The new finance person is really terrific. You got a home run. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You got it. All right, brother. All right, now we go back to open lines. 303-696-1971. Did you find it? Okay. For those of you who are elderly like myself, Alice Brock passed away. And who do you query? Who is Alice Brock? Adam, if you would. Here she is. Arlo Guthrie, singing about Alice. She's passed away yesterday at 83 years of age. You can get anything you want except an Alice. Hit it. "83 years of age. You want Alice's restaurant." Doom, doom. Road tracks. Hey, you want. Bum pow. This is a true story. They throw the garbage out and he gets arrested. They can pull it down. You can get anything you want at Alice's restaurant, a half mile from the railroad tracks. How many of you sang it? But so they throw we're talking, Brock throws out the trash, but ends up tossing it down a hill because they couldn't find a dumpster, and the cops charge them with illegal dumping. They go to jail, and she was in the SDS, and that was what it was. You can get anything you want, Alice's, except an Alice. And was 83 years old. And now she's gone. All right. 303-696-1971. We began the show this morning with Professor David Smith and talking about what's taking place First World War and what we're watching now. And then we talked about how if you look at this, where Biden's entire political organization doesn't want him making decisions or being part of it, yet now we have the missiles. Why is that taking place? Biden has pivoted to allow the Ukrainians to use our missiles, U.S. missiles, paid by you, the taxpayer, in Russia. And why now? And then we're talking about a bunch of different stuff, but had a fight book on Joe Louis and Billy Conn. And so it's kind of, we go from here. We start with Jim. There's two lines open right now. Jim, you're on the show, 303-696-1971. Good afternoon, James.
Good afternoon, Peter. I just think it's interesting that he's decided to do this, Biden administration, and I guess it's Blinken, to escalate with these missiles to be hitting Russia proper. I just wonder if they're trying to start a war, or they're trying to make it so that there will be no peace possible through the Trump administration. Either one is a possibility with the crazies that currently that are on the administration.
Well,
what's your thoughts?
Well, what strikes me, and that's why I wanted to do this, and I did the promo over it. His own guys don't trust him. Yeah. His own part. It had to sink through to me. His own party did not want him. His own party did not trust him. And then this historic point of conflict, and I think it's a repetition of the First World War, and that's why Professor Smith is so great. But now he's going to allow the Ukraine to use our missiles, and these aren't. This isn't some. These missiles are they're ICBMs, as we used to call them, or were called. They're good for about 190 miles. Well, that's Moscow. You tell me.
Well, unfortunately, what's going to happen is based on what America has done, Ukraine is going to become a Trump state. I guess that's what you call that. And it didn't need to happen. They had a negotiated peace and process when the war started, and we nixed it. My wife has relatives in eastern Ukraine that are now refugees in Germany. So I have first-hand account of what's going on. And it's this, I just am ashamed of what our country has become.
Well, now the Russians have deployed 10,000 North Korean soldiers and little green men.
Right.
And
so do you know how that happened? You know how that happened?
In terms of how the relationship, how it happened?
No. Do you understand why they did that?
You explain it to me, but I have an explanation, but what do you think?
Okay, I found out about this. So Iran, North Korea, and Russia have this agreement that if you invade their country, the other country will come to their defense.
Well, that's my First World War scenario.
Similar to what happened in World War I.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why. No, I know that's
Ukraine
exactly.
invaded Russia.
Yep.
Therefore, North Korea could send troops in order to get them out of Russia.
And
I was not aware of that point.
Well, but that's the NATO that sets Putin off.
Right.
Putin has been skeptical of all of this and skeptical of the NATO alliance as a whole, and says he's going to pressure Ukraine. But again, it's a flip of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
And but it's so frightening because the web of alliances that you're talking about, the Europeans, and I mean that's the setup for First World War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, Peter. I mean, the fact of the matter is, None of this needed to happen.
Nothing.
None of these Russians and Ukrainians had to die.
But the First World War could be answered the same way. It didn't have to happen. I love your call.
Right.
Thank you, brother. Be safe. All right, let's go to Jay. Jay, you're on a radio show. It's a Saturday afternoon, and good afternoon.
Hi. Last week you had the author Pete Early discussing about his son and his mental illness.
Yes.
And it really changed the way I look at things, because usually I'll drive by these homeless camps and I just tell my kids they don't want to work. And, you know, I've donated to Step Denver every year since you've been advocating it, and get them to work, and that will help them. My question to you is, would that have worked with Pete Early's son, or was he too mentally ill? And are these that can make having people work through the mental illness, I guess?
Well, since my relationship with Bob Cote, and I spent a lot of time at Step, Pete Early's son went into schizophrenia. He was a brilliant kid. He had gone off, I think, to Georgetown and to school, which isn't any punk thing to do. And then the disease kicks in. But I, you know, with respect to him and everything he's gone through, and I would never want to, but that wasn't what I've seen come in off the streets and get sober at Step. I can't honestly say I ever met a schizophrenic. So that's my answer to it. What I've met are a drug and alcohol, and remember, alcohol is a drug and alcohol addicted. Is there mental illness? Sure. I mean, you can guise depression with alcohol. You can do all kinds of stuff with alcohol and drugs. But when those guys, when they get away from the addiction, they seem to be okay. I mean, and again, I don't want to judge anybody on this one, Jay.
Yeah. Can you guise schizophrenia with alcohol and drugs?
Yeah, I think it's like watching. The one thing I watched with schizophrenics was chain smokers. It's somehow nicotine does something for schizophrenia. But the guys that I met over 35 years of being now in the end, just simply, you know, speak for them and be on the emeritus board. And I wish Bob were alive and could answer the question, Jay. It isn't, and I'm not the right guy to answer it, but it has not been my experience.
Pete, if you were the homeless czar in Denver, it troubles me so much. I just drive by these camps and I can't believe it. What would your solution be? Sobriety
and work is the only answer. There is no other answer. If there was, I certainly
and mental institutions for someone like Pete Early.
What happened? It was during the end of Reagan, and Dick Lamb was governor, and we talked about it that day with Early. Is they called it mainstreaming, I think was the term that they had given to it, and they were going to empty out, quote, asylums. And all they really did, I was doing cop stories back then for Denver Magazine. All they really did, Jay, was create a class of victims because they gave them money. And these are people that was the rise of Bob Cote, that they were actually getting Social Security checks, and they had them delivered to bars.
Right.
And all you're doing then is, I mean, the muggings and the murders and the theft and everything that went on. It's very difficult. I don't think the answer is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Do we have these laws back then that if you're not a danger to yourself or danger to others, you can't be put in a mental institution? Do we have those laws in the 50s and 60s? I was too young to know.
You know, I don't know how to answer that, because I know that there were places. I actually knew somebody growing up that we laughed about it as kids, but it isn't funny that they were taken away.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, looking back on it, whatever he was a man in the neighborhood, and they came for him. Yeah, they came for him, took him.
People blame Reagan, but if I can remember, didn't it start with Geraldo Rivera doing the investigation of Willowbrook mental institution in Staten Island?
Yeah, but remember, Dick Lamb's governor of Colorado. He's a Democrat. He was on board. And was Reagan, I've been reading about how much when Reagan attempted to do what Donald Trump's going to try and do to cut government spending. And it in some ways it worked, and in a lot of ways it failed, because they're so entrenched. And it's when Donald Trump's saying he's going to do these things, and you want to believe that he can, but let's see. I don't have, Jay, your questions are really brilliant. I don't have answers. What we do is, when these idiots that want to have you can go shoot dope and be safe and all this kind of stuff, that's insanity. I mean, it really is. The border has to be plugged because that's where the drugs are coming, but drugs get here. I mean, finishing
but
early.
What causes them to inject the drugs? I've never used drugs or drank.
No, it is. I never IV drugs, but I did all kinds of stuff with drugs and alcohol. But I think there's a
but
need.
Pete, you had a stable life. You had a mother, a father, a lower middle class background. What was the impetus for using the alcohol?
I started to drink at 13. We all drank. And you grew up in a neighborhood. We were just talking about Billy Conn. You grew up in a neighborhood where drinking's taking place. I didn't think smoking cigarettes was that much of it really wasn't. My mom and dad both smoked. My uncles all smoked. My aunts and uncles smoked. Everybody drank, and I thought it was okay. I mean, there's part of that. If you turn on television, do yourself a favor. It's something that I look at there's going to be a bunch of commercials now between now and Thanksgiving. Look at a soft drink, Pepsi, I don't care what it is, Coca-Cola. Look at one of those ads. Then look at a beer ad. And with the exception of the product, it's the same ad. Everybody's having a good time, and everybody's handsome people, and everybody's well-dressed, and everybody's just wonderful, and nobody's getting hammered over top of the Thanksgiving table. The Christmas tree's not down. It's like, and everybody's wonderful folks, and they're just having a great time. You can make it Mountain Dew, or you can make it Budweiser. I mean, we have and I can't, we live in a world full of alcohol, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's crazy. My block in Brooklyn had 100 homes, and we had barbecues and everything else, and I never saw anyone drink. I guess it was just different.
I saw it. I saw it all the time.
I never saw anyone drink a beer from a bottle on the street until I moved out here.
No, listen. I grew up east of the Mississippi, and I saw putting a paper bag over a quart of beer, and then wrapping the bag with a quart inside. It was like,
none of my friends were drinkers. None of my friends' parents were either. They were like school teachers, and accountants. Nobody.
Don't kid yourself. Profession does not do anything about the disease of alcoholism or drugs. I mean, if you think, if anybody, look, the disease doesn't care. I mean, and if you look at drug addiction as a disease, then you got a chance of beating it. If you look at it as behavior, you'll lose every time. If you can't treat, it is the only disease that the doctor and the patient are the same guy. I'm my own doctor, but I'm also my own patient. And it's just, I mean, it's that had to come home to me that, hey, I'm in charge. Well, I'm in charge of it.
To end this call, just let me tell you, having you sober on the radio for 40 years here in Denver has been an asset to me.
Well, you're a kind caller, and there's a lot of people who disagree with you. Thank you, brother. All right. We have one line open, 303-696-1971. Good afternoon, everybody. 710 KNUS. Again, a quick reminder, today and tomorrow at Larson Ski and Sport. And it's a swap meet. And if you're a skier or a boarder and you want to look for great deals, this is it. The swap submissions is what they're called. Got to be picked up by Wednesday. And all the guys are there. And if your gear sells, you choose between all of it. And just go take all your old skis, all your old boards. all your old boots, all your old gogs, gear. Take it out there, and they're easy to find. You get off I-70 on Kipling, head south on Kipling, and you'll see it right away on your right-hand side, south of I-70 on Kipling. Today and tomorrow, John Marriott and the guys at Larson's. All right, get us out of here and bring us back. The late, great Sam Cooke. 710 KNUS. Good afternoon, everybody. Lines are jammed. 63 will be the high. Motorcycle sitting outside. Here we go. Who are we going to go to? Jim on 2? Okay. Jim on line 2. Hey, Jim, thanks. You're on the show.
Hey, Peter. Good to hear you back on the radio. I've called in the past, but just jumped in my truck leaving work, and I heard the last caller talking about the alcoholism as a disease, and the fact is it is a disease.
Sure.
And anybody that, like you said, tries to go a different route is just not going to get the answer that you're looking for. And I've kind of come to a conclusion that somewhere, somehow, a lab or a doctor is going to come up with the connection between diabetes and alcoholism.
Sugar.
Yes.
I think if you see the guys, walking on the streets and their feet, you see them limping. And I was around a lot of physicians. Alcohol leaches calcium. And that's why, their bones are so fragile. And you see guys doing, that alcohol shuffle on lower downtown. That's just because the calcium's been leached out of their body by alcohol. Same thing with their teeth.
Okay. I didn't know it affected the teeth. I wasn't aware of the feet. I do know gout is a problem for anyone that has gout and drinks, whether they're alcoholic or not. But
yes,
it is an interesting thing that in families, everybody drinks, but only a few are affected, and it does skip around. I mean, just like heart disease or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a proclivity. There's a you're predestined.
Predisposition.
Doesn't mean it'll happen, but you have to be careful because, it can skip part of a generation, hit another part of a gen. I mean, we talked to my grandson already. He's not a little guy anymore, but, and no one, I mean, I saw it everywhere growing up, and I didn't think there was much wrong with it's crazy to think about that.
No, you're right. My folks and even I growing up watching people drink beer at the holidays or any day for that matter was a norm, and smoking the cigarettes. Go back, watch any of the old television shows, and everybody's drinking liquor in the office and smoking cigarettes.
Sure. But
trying to solve a murder.
No, but I always said that, we running gag on it, the alcohol would become, at this time of the year, my dad would bring home old granddad. That's what it was, old granddad. And that was like expensive whiskey, I think. And then, but other than that, they would drink Imperial, Four Roses, I used to do a running joke on it. But my uncle, who I just adored, who actually he lost his legs to diabetes because they wouldn't quit. And he was a World War II guy, and he'd been through some pretty bad times. But he used to say, give me some of that Chinese whiskey, Shen Li. And I'm a kid, man. That's a funny ass thing to hear, because remember Shenli's or whatever it was called. And then they had I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think it was spelled with a CH, correct?
Yes. And it was,
yes, sir.
And it was some cheap, I
remember the bottle.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember the drink itself, but Wild Turkey and Jim Beam was our family's choices.
Old Man Daniels. Sometimes my uncle would say Old Man Daniels, but Shen Li, that was one. But they had Corby's, I can remember. And then Iron City Beer was the local, that was the beer. And I've told the story before, but my uncle, I wish he was in the room right now and talk and tell stories, but he would say, I sent some of that Iron City beer off to get analyzed to the chemist. And I said, he said, a note came back and it said, "Dear Mr. Boyles, your horse is really sick." he told that joke. And I laughed at that joke, every time, because, they'd let us drink and they'd let us have a sip of their beer or something. I never.
Yeah. As a kid, I remember asking for a sip and you get a taste of the beer, but
no, we all got that. And and it didn't matter, it's like, I said, I started drinking at 13 and I don't know what
my father did as well. So when he was, he's the youngest of, I think, was it 14 or 15 kids? I think it was 13. I'm sorry, but never had a problem finding a drink at that age either.
No.
He never stopped. He did stop.
Oh,
but it was tough. It was.
Oh, we have running gags on stuff. My brother and I would talk about it, what we witnessed and what we saw. And, I have a really good friend. I won't use names, but, how many times did the Christmas tree get pushed over? That's a Christmas.
Every year.
Do you remember those?
Knock down, drag out.
Oh, yeah. Somebody fall into the tree. I'm not making that tree.
They're getting a new tree.
I know that tree would go over and Christmas Eve church, and it was, and it's kind of like you look back on it now, you think, well, what's the great line? What did you expect? What did you think was going to happen?
Right.
and we smoked cigarettes and but it wasn't just me by myself. It was like I seem to
Oh, it's a
yeah, it was
family
all of us. Yeah. And
thing. My mother's side of the family, same thing. They actually would have the older kids watch the younger kids while they all went out drinking and dancing.
oh, sure.
And that's what took
Sure.
place every night, every weekend for sure.
What's wrong with him? What's wrong with that?
We're going Dutch hopping.
Oh, and I remember there was a bar my dad drank, and there was a lot of bars my dad drank in, but the women were not allowed to sit in the bar. It's like true. They weren't allowed. Guys would. Then there was like a back room where men and women, you could sit and drink together, but but men.
But at the bar.
No.
Okay.
No. And one of the bars, I should get my cousin on, but that would be I'd never work again. But there was a bar, no names, but and one of his relatives, they weren't our married relatives, they were my cousin's relatives, and he's sober now too. But and now and because the guy owned a bar, his wife could tend bar. I can't explain it, but she could tend bar, and but nobody. But it was just weird stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I never seen that I know of. Perhaps it was that way in Denver.
No. There are women bartenders and women sitting, at the bar, but
yeah. Even back, in the 50s, I think that. But they had probably dance halls.
Oh yeah.
More than sitting at the bar. They wanted to go dancing.
Sure. So. Do you remember stand-up bars where there was no stools, no seats?
No, that would have been a challenge.
No, you stood those Irish bars, they were stand-ups, and there's always
I can see why that is, because I've sat down and drank so much that I think I'm fine, and as soon as I stand up, I find out I'm not. So
no, they always had a picture. There was always a picture of Jack Kennedy, and Jimmy Hoffa's picture. And then the Pope's picture, that was a big one.
Oh, yeah.
I got that Pope's picture. But Jimmy Hoffa, and I've told this before, written about it. And I was right on the Allegheny a month ago, but it's so much of it has changed and different now. But you went in those bars when Jimmy Hoffa was running the union, when Jimmy was running the Teamsters, and you went in and popped off about Jimmy, you better duck. You better duck.
Yeah.
I've told people that story. You went there and run Jimmy down. You better get out of there quick. You better get out of there real quick. Those guys are that way. I love the call, man. What do you do for without giving it up? What do you do for a living?
I work for a chemical distributor.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, all's well, man. Take care.
All right.
Happy Thanksgiving. You too, man. Our friends at Water Pros, and Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. And you can remove what's called forever chemicals or microplastics or hard water. Water Pros, the Peter Boyles special. How can you go wrong with that name, right? And it's $31.95. That's $3,195. You get the entire setup. It's a whole water softener. It's a point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system. It's all fully installed. But here's the first step that you do, which I think is really great. Ask them to come to your home and test your water. Answer all your questions and concerns about your water. If you want, this is a gimme. Get your water tested. Trustworthy guys with water, you'll do it. Water Pros, family-owned and veteran-operated business dedicated to providing you the best water treatment for less than the other guys. Go, waterpros.net. Now, take the first step. Call our friends up and call 303-862-5554. That's 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554, and ask for the Peter Boyles special. Let them just come out and test your water. And you'll be either shocked or you'll be surprised, but get it done. You go, ooh, look at that. 303-862-5554. Afternoon, everybody. Cycles outside. It's going to be 63 degrees. Got to do something. It is a Saturday. Remember, I will be here to do the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade on Wednesday. Friday, work the show. We're going to talk about, I think we're going to focus on the Kennedy assassination. All this new stuff is just really, really good. And then back here on Saturday morning, let's start with Dave on line 3. Lines are jammed. Hey, David, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I want to say every show I listen to ends up with the Google search. So
yeah, me too. Everything I do anymore ends up with a Google search.
Yeah, it's just your shows are great, and they have been since I discovered you driving to Sheridan, Wyoming in 1980.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. On the blowtorch. But anyway, hey, you had a guy on a few weeks back, actually, I think a month ago already, talking about Scientology,
yes.
L. Ron Hubbard.
Yes.
And the one thing that I was trying to get in, but it was too late. But I always was fascinated with Hubbard's association and broken friendship with Robert Heinlein.
Well, Robert Heinlein was the other sci-fi writer.
Correct.
Yeah, and he wrote Starship Troopers and just all of
Stranger in a Strange Land.
I was a stranger in a strange land. That's right.
And that was Heinlein's parody of
that's right.
L. Ron Hubbard's book.
Yeah.
So it was something that it broke their friendship, and it was just fascinating that one took off one way and the other one took off the other way.
Heinlein even talked about a conversation he had with L. Ron, and L. Ron said, "You really want to get rich?" And Heinlein said, "Yeah." And he said, "Invent a religion."
Yeah.
He said that, or allegedly said that.
So if we all grok, then I guess we don't need them.
They got to be. You grokked them. You remember you grok them. You groke them.
That's right.
I probably never pronounced it right, but and he wrote Starship Troopers. He wrote.
Yeah.
You ever read that stuff about being patriotic and being a trooper, and you earned. You earned your right.
Yeah, Starship Troopers was not a science fiction book about military as much as it was a social commentary.
Very good, Dave. I mean, that's exactly right. And
so, well, my theory is that fiction tells the truth better than historical facts do, because the winner always tells the story, and fiction can be written by whoever. So
remember, they're called court historians. The winner gets to write the history, like, as horrible as it may sound.
Exactly.
Had the Germans won the Second World War, history would be written and spoken about and taught totally different than it is right now.
Okay. Yep. So anyway, I just want to say thank you. And
I mean, how long? How
forever?
You read these. It's like Gulliver's Travels. It's a political statement. All of them are. Yeah, they're writing politics. They're writing, which end of the egg, and that was about religion. And
but it dawned on me about 20, 25 years ago that these are truths that people can't bring up in polite conversation, so they write their fiction.
Or if you do. It's kind of like it's if you do, and it gets somewhat limited after and so that's why the right now there's book banning taking place in this country from the left as well as from the right. And to somebody like me, that's very frightening.
Yeah, me too. It's scary to be told what you can and can't read.
Yeah.
And it's everybody. I mean, my mom taught me to read when I was. Yeah. The first thing she did was shove a book in front of me when I was probably 3 or 4.
Yep.
and I grew up on rocket ship to Mars and all of Heinlein's
Yep.
spaceship, spacesuit will travel, and all those early books like that.
Well, you know, when they go in a library and take out Huckleberry Finn, I mean, there's no cause to do that. I mean, there's
Catcher in the Rye. Yeah,
the catcher is gone now too. That's right, and and it comes from both sides. I mean, it's not like it isn't like, well, only these guys are doing it or only these guys are doing it. They're vetting books, and once that begins, and I hope that these guys, this next group, can turn that around and say, stay out of libraries and stay. But now we're seeing other stuff put on academics, and I'm with you, David. I again, I don't have an answer for any of this, but it has like we started out this morning with Professor Smith. It's all been done before.
Oh, he was great.
Thank you, but it was all happened either once or twice or 3 or 4 times before, and it's back. We'll see what happens. Good Thanksgiving, brother man. Thank you. Be safe. All right, everybody. We are literally out of time. The imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade will be this Wednesday. I'll appear with Jeff and Billy on Tuesday to plug it. And then Thanksgiving, of course, Thursday. Friday, I really want to look at the new stuff on the Kennedy assassination. That was the turning point. And between, I believe if I could ever spend like 10 years getting smart, the moment that Jack Kennedy dies to the second Richard Nixon resigns, the course is set. Remember, Children's Hospital Colorado Toy Run is Sunday, December the 8th. And the guys are back Monday morning. Take care of yourselves. Adam, thank you. Thank you. Good job, son. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your weekend. I'll see you next Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Thanks.